Hello friends. Did you know nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy these stories, please hit that subscribe button and leave a like. It really helps. Thank you for being here. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. The Nevada desert in July is a special kind of hell. The asphalt shimmers like water that doesn't exist, and the heat makes your brain feel like it's cooking inside your skull. My name is Ambrose Whitlock, and I've been driving these roads for 12 years. Long enough to know every mile marker, every rest stop, every quirk of the desert. Or so I thought. It was a Tuesday night around 11:30 when everything went sideways. I was hauling a load of electronics from Reno to Las Vegas, a route I'd done hundreds of times. The AC in my rig was working overtime, fighting against the heat that still radiated from the pavement even hours after sunset. The stretch between Tonopah and Goldfield is particularly desolate. Nothing but sagebrush and Joshua trees for miles in every direction. No cell service either. Just you, the road, and whatever thoughts keep you company in the dark. I'd been driving for about 6 hours straight when I saw it. A faint glow off to the right, maybe a quarter mile from the highway. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light. Desert mirages don't just happen during the day. Your tired eyes can play all sorts of games with you at night. But as I got closer, the glow became more distinct. It was coming from a building, an old diner by the looks of it. The neon sign was partially lit, casting pink and blue shadows across the desert floor. I could make out part of the name, SSLVRDSRT Dinar. Half the letters were burned out. Now, here's the thing. I know this stretch of road like the back of my hand. There's never been a diner here, not in all my years of driving this route. The nearest food stop is at least 40 miles in either direction. My stomach growled, reminding me I hadn't eaten since breakfast. The protein bars in my cab weren't going to cut it, and something about the place pulled at me. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe it was hunger, maybe it was something else entirely. I slowed down, checking my mirrors. No traffic behind me, none ahead. The desert was empty except for me and this impossible diner. Against my better judgment, I pulled off the highway onto a dirt road I swear hadn't been there before. The gravel crunched under my tires as I rolled into the parking lot. There were no other vehicles, which should have been my first real warning. What diner stays open this late with no customers? But the lights were on inside, warm and inviting through the dusty windows. I parked the rig and sat there for a moment, engine idling. Something felt off about the whole situation. The building looked old, really old, like it had been sitting here since the 50s, slowly being eaten by the desert. The metal siding was rusted in places, and the windows were clouded with years of dust and grime. But through those windows I could see movement. Someone was definitely inside. I grabbed my wallet and keys, leaving the truck running. Just a quick stop, I told myself. Grab some food and get back on the road. The delivery deadline was tight, and I couldn't afford to waste too much time. The door to the diner was heavy, and it groaned when I pushed it open. A bell chimed overhead, the sound sharp in the quiet night. Inside, the place was exactly what you'd expect from an old roadside diner. Red vinyl booths, checkered floor, a long counter with swivel stools. The smell hit me immediately. Coffee, grease, and something else. Something sweet and slightly off, like fruit that's just starting to turn. "Evening, hun." The voice made me jump. Behind the counter stood a woman, maybe 60 years old, with graying hair pulled back in a tight bun. She wore a classic waitress uniform, complete with a name tag that read Minerva. Minerva Blackwood, to be exact. The tag looked new, but her uniform was faded and worn. "Didn't expect anyone this late," she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. but we're always happy to serve a hungry traveler. I nodded, still taking in the strange atmosphere of the place. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in a harsh, greenish tint. A jukebox in the corner played something I couldn't quite identify. The tune was familiar but wrong somehow, like a song played in a different key. "Coffee?" Minerva asked, already pouring a cup without waiting for my answer. "Sure," I said, sliding onto one of the counter stools. The vinyl squeaked under my weight. "And maybe something to eat, what's good?" She set the coffee in front of me. The mug was hot, almost too hot to touch, and steam rose from the dark liquid inside. "Everything's good here, but the special tonight is meatloaf. Comes with mashed potatoes and green beans. Fresh made today." Fresh made. I looked around the empty diner again. Who makes fresh food for a place with no customers? But my stomach was past caring about logic. "That sounds perfect." Minerva disappeared through a door marked kitchen, leaving me alone in the dining area. I sipped the coffee, which was surprisingly good. Strong and bitter, just how I liked it. The caffeine helped clear some of the road fog from my brain, but it also made me more aware of how strange this all was. The jukebox continued its off-key melody. I stood up and walked over to it, curious. The machine was old, probably original to the building. The song list was behind cracked glass, the titles barely readable. But what I could make out didn't make sense. Songs I knew, but with wrong dates. Songs from the 70s listed as being from the 50s. Songs from the 50s that I'd never heard of. "Food's up." Minerva's voice pulled me back to the counter. A plate sat steaming where I'd been sitting. The meatloaf looked perfect. Too perfect. Like something from a photograph in a cookbook. The mashed potatoes were sculpted into a perfect mound. Not a lump in sight. The green beans were bright green, almost glowing under the fluorescent lights. "Looks great," I said, sitting back down. Minerva watched me, that same not quite right smile on her face. I picked up the fork and took a bite of the meatloaf. The taste was incredible. Better than anything I'd had at a roadside diner. Better than most home-cooked meals I'd eaten. It was perfectly seasoned, perfectly cooked, perfectly everything. But as I chewed, something nagged at me. The texture was slightly off. Not bad, just different. Like the meat wasn't quite what I expected. I pushed the thought aside and kept eating. I was hungry, and it tasted good. That's all that mattered. "You drive that big rig out there?" Minerva asked, refilling my coffee without being asked. "Yeah," I said between bites. "Been driving for years. Must get lonely out there on the road. Sometimes, but I like the solitude." She nodded, still watching me eat. Her eyes never seemed to blink. "We get a lot of truckers through here. They all say the same thing. Like the quiet, like being alone, until they don't." I looked up from my plate. "What do you mean?" "Oh, nothing really. Just that everyone needs company sometimes. Human connection, someone to talk to." She leaned on the counter, closer to me. I could smell her perfume now, floral and heavy, almost covering that sweet sick smell I'd noticed earlier. "I guess," I said, suddenly uncomfortable. I focused on finishing my meal, wanting to get back on the road. The food was settling heavy in my stomach now, and I was starting to feel drowsy. Too drowsy for just having drunk coffee. "You feeling all right, hun?" Minerva asked. Her voice sounded distant, like she was speaking from the other end of a tunnel. I tried to answer, but my tongue felt thick in my mouth. The room started to spin slightly, the fluorescent lights creating trails when I moved my head. I gripped the counter, trying to steady myself. "Maybe you should rest a bit," Minerva said. "We've got rooms in the back. Lots of truckers rest here." Rooms? This was a diner, not a motel. I tried to stand, but my legs felt like rubber. The coffee mug slipped from my hand, shattering on the floor. The sound echoed strangely, like it was bouncing off walls that were miles away. "Easy there," a new voice said. Male, deep, coming from somewhere behind me. I turned my head, the motion taking enormous effort. A man stood in the doorway to the kitchen. Tall, thin, wearing a cook's apron that was pristine white except for dark stains around the edges. His face was pale, almost gray, and his eyes were the same not quite right as Minerva's. "This is Silas," Minerva said. "Silas Grimm. He's our cook. Makes everything from scratch." Silas smiled, revealing teeth that were too white, too straight. "Secret family recipes," he said. "Passed down for generations." I tried to speak, to tell them I needed to leave, but the words wouldn't come. My vision was starting to blur around the edges, darkness creeping in from the periphery. The last thing I saw clearly was Minerva and Silas standing side by side, watching me with those unblinking eyes. "Don't worry," Minerva said, her voice now sounding like it was coming from inside my own head. "You're going to be our guest for a while. We take very good care of our guests." The darkness rushed in then, and I felt myself falling. Not onto the floor, but through it, down into something deeper and darker than the desert night outside. The jukebox music followed me down, that wrong key melody becoming a lullaby for unconsciousness. But even as I fell, one thought pierced through the growing fog in my mind. The diner hadn't been here before. I was sure of it. This road, this exact spot, I'd driven past it 1,000 times. There had never been a diner here. So where exactly was I? I woke up to the sound of my own breathing. Heavy, ragged, like I'd been running for miles. My mouth tasted like copper and dirt, and my head felt like someone had taken a sledgehammer to it. The first thing I noticed was the ceiling. Water stains spread across it like a map of some unknown continent, brown and yellow against cracked white paint. This wasn't my truck. This wasn't anywhere I recognized. I tried to sit up, but my body moved like it was filled with wet sand. Every muscle ached. The room spun for a moment before settling into focus. I was lying on a narrow bed with springs that dug into my back. The walls were wood paneling, warped with age and moisture. A single window showed nothing but darkness outside. The events at the diner came flooding back. The food. Minerva Blackwood and Silas Grimm. The way everything had gone fuzzy and wrong. They'd drugged me. That had to be it, something in the food or the coffee. I forced myself to stand, using the wall for support. My keys were gone. So was my wallet. My phone, too. They'd taken everything. The room had one door, painted white but peeling, revealing layers of different colors underneath like geological strata. I tried the handle, locked from the outside. Panic started to set in, but I pushed it down. Panic wouldn't help. I needed to think clearly. I was Ambrose Whitlock. I'd been driving for 12 years, and I'd gotten out of bad situations before. This was just another problem to solve. The window was my next option. It was small, maybe 2 feet by 2 feet, but I might be able to squeeze through. I pressed my face against the glass, trying to see outside. Nothing but desert and the faint outline of mountains in the distance. No lights, no roads visible. But there, maybe 50 yards away, I could make out the shape of my rig. They hadn't moved it far. The window was painted shut, years of paint sealing it closed. I looked around the room for something to pry it open with. There was nothing but the bed and a small dresser that was bolted to the floor. The bed frame was metal, though. Old iron, the kind they don't make anymore. I flipped the mattress off, ignoring the cloud of dust and the things that scurried away from the light. The bed frame had posts that might work. I grabbed one, testing its strength. It took effort, but I managed to work it loose, unscrewing it from the frame. Now I had a weapon, or at least a tool. I went back to the window and started working the post into the gap between the window and the frame. Paint chips fell like snow as I pried. The window groaned but didn't budge. I kept at it, sweat running down my face despite the cool night air seeping through the cracks. Then I heard footsteps in the hallway outside. I froze, the bedpost still in my hand. The footsteps were slow, deliberate. They stopped right outside my door. I heard breathing, heavy and wet. Then a voice, but not Minerva's or Silas's. This was different. Younger, maybe, but with something wrong about it. "You awake in there?" the voice asked. Male, with a slight wheeze. "They can tell when you're awake. No point pretending." I stayed silent, gripping the bedpost tighter. "I was a trucker too," the voice continued. 3 weeks ago, maybe 4. Hard to keep track of time here. Names... Well, it doesn't matter what my name was. I'm nobody now, just like you're going to be. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice rough from whatever they'd given me. There was a laugh, but it sounded more like a cough. "Want? I don't want anything. They just send me to check on the new ones. Make sure you're settling in. Let me out of here." "Can't do that. Door's locked from the outside, and they have the keys. Besides, where would you go? We're nowhere. This place, it's not on any map. It's not supposed to exist." "That's impossible. Every place is somewhere." Another laugh, cough. "You still think the world works the way you thought it did? Give it time. You'll learn. We all do." "How many others are there?" Silence for a moment. Then, enough. They keep us in different rooms. Can't have us talking too much, comparing notes. But I've heard them through the walls, crying mostly, some praying. One guy just screams every night around 3. You'll hear him soon enough. "What do they want with us?" "They feed people," he said simply. "That's what they do. They feed people, and then they keep them, like a collection, like trophies. But it's more than that. They're changing us somehow. The food, it does things to you. You'll see." I moved back to the window, working the bedpost into the gap with renewed urgency. "I'm getting out of here." "Sure you are." We all thought that at first. But the window's too small, even if you get it open. And even if you squeeze through, where you gonna go? Your truck won't start. They did something to it. All our trucks are out there, just sitting in the desert like metal tombstones. The window cracked, not much, just a small fracture in the glass, but it was progress. I kept working. "They'll be coming soon," the voice said. "With more food. You won't want to eat it, but you will. The hunger gets to you eventually, and once you eat enough of it, you stop wanting to leave. You start to understand that this is where you belong now. You're insane. Maybe, probably, but I'm also right, you'll see." The footsteps started again, moving away down the hall. Then they stopped, and the voice came one more time. Fainter now. "Oh, and don't bother trying to break the window. Even if you do, they'll hear it. They hear everything." I kept working anyway. What else was I going to do? The crack in the window grew longer, spreading like lightning across the glass. If I could break it cleanly, maybe I could minimize the noise. But as I worked, I heard other sounds. From the rooms around me. Soft crying from one direction. Mumbling from another. And from somewhere below, the sound of a jukebox playing that same wrong key music from the diner. The window finally gave way with a sharp crack. Not the whole thing, just a section about the size of my hand. Cool air rushed in, carrying the scent of sage and dust. I carefully removed the broken pieces, trying not to cut myself. The opening wasn't big enough to crawl through, but maybe I could enlarge it. That's when I saw the lights. Out in the desert, beyond where my truck sat, there were lights moving. Not headlights, but something else. Like lanterns or torches, bobbing up and down as they moved through the darkness. There were dozens of them, forming a rough circle, maybe a quarter mile from the building. As I watched, the lights began to move in unison, creating patterns in the darkness. It was hypnotic, almost beautiful, until I realized they were getting closer. Whatever was carrying those lights was heading toward the building. Toward me. I backed away from the window, my heart hammering. This was worse than I'd thought. This wasn't just two crazy people running some twisted operation. This was something bigger, something organized. A key rattled in the lock. I spun around, raising the bedpost like a club. The door opened slowly, and Minerva Blackwood stood there, still in her waitress uniform, still wearing that not-quite-right smile. Behind her stood Silas Grimm, and behind him, in the shadows of the hallway, I could see other figures. Tall, thin, moving with that same deliberate slowness. Now, Minerva said, her voice sweet like spoiled honey. No need for violence. We're all friends here. Stay back, I warned, gripping the bedpost tighter. You broke the window, she observed, not seeming particularly concerned. That's going to make the room cold, but don't worry. We'll move you to a better one. One without windows. Some of our guests find windows troubling. I'm not your guest, I'm your prisoner. Such harsh words. She stepped into the room, and I could smell that floral perfume again. So strong it made my eyes water. We prefer to think of it as hospitality. You were hungry, we fed you. You were tired, we gave you a place to rest. Isn't that what hospitality is? You drugged me. We prepared you, Silas corrected, his voice flat and emotionless. The transformation requires preparation. Your body needs to be receptive. Transformation? What transformation? Minerva's smile widened, showing too many teeth. You'll understand soon. Everyone does eventually. Fighting it just makes it harder, more painful. But if you accept it, embrace it, it can be almost pleasant. I swung the bedpost at her, but my movements were sluggish, like I was moving through water. She stepped aside easily, and Silas grabbed my wrist with surprising strength. His skin was cold, so cold it burned. Now, Minerva said again. Let's not be difficult. It's time for your next meal. They dragged me from the room, my struggles useless against their unnatural strength. The hallway was long and narrow, with doors on both sides. Some were silent, but behind others I could hear movement, whispers, soft sobbing. How many people were trapped here? We passed a window in the hallway, and I could see those lights in the desert were much closer now. Close enough that I could make out shapes holding them. They weren't human shapes. They were too tall, too thin, moving in ways that hurt to watch. Our family, Minerva said, noticing where I was looking. They come to witness each new addition, to welcome you home. This isn't my home. Not yet, she agreed. But it will be. Give it time. Everyone comes to love it here eventually, even the ones who fight the hardest. Especially them, actually. They make the most devoted family members once they turn. They brought me to another room. This one larger, with a table set for dinner. The same fluorescent lights, the same checkered floor. It was like a piece of the diner had been transplanted here. On the table was a plate of food. It looked like pot roast this time, with carrots and potatoes. It smelled incredible, and despite everything, my stomach growled. Eat, Silas commanded. No. You will, Minerva said, that sweet voice never wavering. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually the hunger wins. It always does. And each bite brings you closer to understanding, closer to becoming what you're meant to be. What are you? I asked. What are you really? She tilted her head, considering the question. We're feeders. We've always been feeders. Since before your highways were built, before your trucks were invented. We feed the hungry, and in return, they become part of us, part of the family. It's a fair trade, don't you think? You're insane. Perhaps. But we're also eternal, and soon you will be too. They left me in that room with the food for 3 days. I know because there was a clock on the wall, its second hand ticking away the hours with maddening precision. They'd taken the bedpost from me, removed anything I could use as a weapon or tool. Just me, the table, the chair, and that plate of pot roast that never seemed to spoil. The hunger started on the second day. Real hunger, the kind that makes your stomach feel like it's eating itself. I'd gone without food before on long hauls when money was tight. But this was different. This was agony. Every breath brought the smell of that meat, perfectly seasoned, practically begging to be eaten. I could hear others through the walls. The man who'd spoken to me that first night was right. There was someone who screamed every night at 3. Someone else who prayed constantly, the same prayer over and over until the words lost all meaning. And sometimes, worst of all, I heard laughter. Not crazy laughter, but genuine amusement, like someone was having the time of their life. On the third night, Minerva came back. She looked exactly the same as before. Same uniform, same hairstyle, same wrong smile. She sat across from me at the table, folding her hands in front of her like we were having a casual conversation. "You're stronger than most," she said. "Usually they break by the second day. But you truckers, you're a different breed. Used to hardship, used to being alone with your thoughts." "Go to hell," I managed, though my voice was weak from thirst. They'd left water, but I was afraid to drink it. Afraid it was drugged like everything else in this place. "Silas is impressed," she continued, ignoring my comment. "He says you have potential. Not everyone does, you know. Some people just fade. But you, Ambrose Whitlock, you could be special." "How do you know my name?" She laughed, a sound like wind chimes made of bones. "We know everything about you. Your roots, your schedules, your habits. We've been watching you for months, waiting for the right time. You're not random, dear. You're chosen. Chosen for what? To feed others, of course. That's what we do. We feed the hungry, and then they feed others, and the cycle continues. It's been this way for generations. My grandmother fed travelers on the old wagon trails. Her grandmother fed indigenous peoples before that. We adapt to the times, but the purpose remains the same. You're serial killers. Such a limited way of thinking. We don't kill anyone. We transform them, make them better, stronger, part of something greater than themselves." She reached across the table and touched the plate, sliding it closer to me. "All you have to do is eat." My stomach cramped violently at the sight of the food so close. "What's in it? What are you feeding people? Does it matter? It's nourishment. It's survival. It's evolution." She stood up, smoothing her uniform. "I'll leave you to think about it. But remember, Ambrose, the longer you wait, the harder it becomes. Your body is already changing, already adapting to its new environment. Fighting it only causes pain." She left, and I was alone again with the food. The meat had a slight sheen to it now, like it was sweating. But it still smelled incredible. My hand shook as I reached for the fork, then pulled back. No, I wouldn't give in. I couldn't. But by the fourth day, I was delirious. The room spun when I stood. My tongue felt like sandpaper. The hallucinations started. Shadows moving in the corners, whispers that might have been real or might have been my mind fracturing. And through it all, that damn clock kept ticking. That's when I heard something different. Not through the walls, but from outside. Engines, truck engines, multiple ones approaching from the highway. My heart leaped. Maybe someone had reported me missing. Maybe help was finally coming. I crawled to the door, pressing my ear against it. I could hear commotion in the building. Footsteps moving quickly, doors opening and closing. Minerva's voice, sharp and commanding, though I couldn't make out the words. Then, clear as day, I heard a voice I recognized. "Where is he? Where's Ambrose?" It was my dispatcher back in Reno, old Ray Carpenter, who'd been sending me on runs for 5 years. But how? How did he know where to find me? The door to my room flew open. Silas Grimm stood there, his pale face twisted with something that might have been anger or fear. "Get up," he commanded. "Now." I tried to stand but collapsed. 4 days without food had taken its toll. Silas grabbed me under the arms and hauled me up like I weighed nothing. He half carried, half dragged me down the hallway. We passed other open doors, and I caught glimpses of the other prisoners. They looked like I felt. Hollow-eyed, emaciated, broken. We emerged into the diner area, and I saw them. 3 truckers, big guys with baseball bats and tire irons. But they weren't moving. They stood frozen in place, their eyes wide with terror. And standing behind the counter, still smiling that horrible smile, was Minerva. "Gentlemen," she said sweetly, "how nice of you to join us for dinner." That is when I noticed the plates in front of them. Full plates, steam rising from fresh food, and their hands were moving slowly, mechanically, bringing forks to their mouths even as their eyes begged for help. "No!" I tried to shout, but it came out as a whisper. "Don't eat it!" Too late. They were chewing, swallowing, their bodies acting against their will. Minerva watched with satisfaction as they ate every bite. "Your friends were so concerned about you," she said to me. "So we invited them to stay. The more the merrier, don't you think?" The 3 truckers finished their meals and stood up in unison. The terror in their eyes was replaced by something else, emptiness. Like someone had reached inside and scooped out everything that made them human. "Take them to their rooms," Minerva instructed Silas. "Let them rest. They've had a long journey." "What did you do to them?" I demanded. "The same thing we're going to do to you eventually." But they were easier. They came here full of anger, full of violence. Those types always fall the fastest. You, though, you're different. You came here with curiosity, with caution. That's why you're still fighting. Silas started leading the 3 men away, and they followed without resistance. As they passed me, one of them, a young guy named Bradley I'd met at a truck stop once, looked at me. For just a second, I saw recognition in his eyes. Then it was gone, replaced by that terrible emptiness. "You see," Minerva said, "it's so much easier if you just accept it. The food doesn't just nourish your body, it nourishes your soul. It takes away the pain, the fear, the loneliness. All those dark thoughts that keep you up at night on those long, empty highways. Wouldn't you like to be free of all that?" "I'd rather die." "No, you wouldn't. If you wanted to die, you would have found a way by now. You want to live. You just don't want to live like this. But this is temporary. What comes after, that's eternal." She brought out a new plate. This time, it was a burger and fries. The burger was perfect, juice dripping down the sides. The cheese melted just right. The fries were golden brown and crispy. My mouth watered involuntarily. "Last chance," she said. "Eat willingly, and you keep some part of yourself. Keep fighting and will feed you anyway, but you'll lose everything. You'll be like your friends there, empty vessels, waiting to be filled with purpose. I looked at the plate. I looked at her. I thought about my life on the road. The loneliness she mentioned was real. The dark thoughts were real. Would it really be so bad to let go, to become something else? My hand moved toward the burger. Minerva smiled wider. Then I heard it. That jukebox music from the first night, playing from somewhere in the building. That wrong key melody that had started all this. And I remembered something. Music doesn't play wrong naturally. It has to be made wrong, deliberately changed. Just like they were trying to change me. I grabbed the plate and threw it at Minerva's face. She didn't dodge. The food splattered across her, and for the first time, her smile faltered. The facade cracked, and I saw something underneath. Not a face, not really. Something older, hungrier, with too many teeth and eyes that weren't quite where eyes should be. "You stupid, stubborn man," she hissed, her voice no longer sweet, but raw and ancient. "You could have been special. You could have been one of us. Now you'll just be meat." She lunged at me, moving faster than anything human should move. But 4 days without food had done something to me. Not made me weaker, but lighter, clearer. I rolled aside, and she crashed into the table. I ran, not toward the exit, Silas was blocking that, but toward the kitchen. There had to be a back door. There's always a back door. Behind me, I heard Minerva shrieking orders, heard Silas's heavy footsteps following. The kitchen was a nightmare. Pots bubbled on stoves with things inside that didn't look like food. Meat hung from hooks, but the shapes were wrong. Too long, too familiar. I didn't look closer, I couldn't. There was a door at the back, heavy and metal with a push bar. I slammed into it and it flew open, spilling me into the desert night. The cool air hit me like a slap, clearing my head even more. My truck was 50 yards away. The keys were gone, but I knew where I kept the spare. Every trucker has a spare hidden somewhere. Mine was in a magnetic box under the fuel tank. I ran, my legs shaking, my lungs burning. Behind me, the diner's door burst open. I didn't look back. The magnetic box was there, rusty but intact. My fingers fumbled with it, and the key fell into the sand. I dropped to my knees, searching frantically. Found it. Climbed into the cab. The engine turned over on the first try, despite what the voice in the hallway had said. Maybe they'd lied. Maybe they hadn't gotten to my truck yet. I threw it in gear and floored it, spraying gravel as I peeled out. In the mirror, I saw them standing in the parking lot. Minerva, Silas, and a dozen others I hadn't seen before. All watching. All perfectly still. But they weren't following. Why weren't they following? I drove for 3 hours straight, pushing my rig as hard as it would go. No stops, no slowing down, just the endless black ribbon of highway stretching ahead. My hands were welded to the wheel, knuckles white, shoulders locked. Every few seconds I checked the mirrors, expecting to see headlights pursuing me. But there was nothing. Just the empty desert night. When I finally hit the outskirts of Las Vegas, the city lights were like salvation. I pulled into the first truck stop I saw, a massive, well-lit place with dozens of other rigs. Safety in numbers. I parked between 2 other trucks and sat there shaking for 20 minutes before I could move. My phone was gone, but the truck's CB radio still worked. I called in to dispatch expecting to hear Ray Carpenter's voice. Instead, I got silence, then static, then a voice I didn't recognize. "Whitlock, that you? Where the hell have you been? You're 4 days overdue." 4 days? My voice cracked. "Who is this? Where's Ray?" Ray Carpenter? Man, he retired 6 months ago. This is Daniels. You feeling all right? You sound rough. 6 months ago. But I'd heard Ray's voice at the diner. Clear as day. He'd come looking for me with those other truckers, hadn't he? I need to report something, I said. There's a place out in the desert. A diner. People are being held there against their will. A diner? Where exactly? I tried to explain, but realized I couldn't. The exit I'd taken, the road to the diner, I couldn't remember the mile markers. It was like trying to recall a dream, the details slipping away the more I reached for them. Never mind, I said. I'll file a report when I get in. I delivered my load 12 hours late. The client was furious, but I didn't care. I was alive. That was all that mattered. The company docked my pay and put a note in my file, but they didn't fire me. Good drivers were hard to find, and I'd been reliable for years. I never filed that report. What would I say? That a diner that shouldn't exist had tried to turn me into something inhuman? That I'd been held captive by people who fed travelers mysterious food? They'd think I was crazy. Maybe I was. I tried to find the place again. Not to go back, God, no, but to prove to myself it was real. I drove that stretch of highway between Tonopah and Goldfield a dozen times over the next month. I never found the exit, never saw the glow of neon lights in the desert. It was like it had never existed, but I knew it had. The weight I'd lost during those 4 days, the marks on my wrists from where Silas had grabbed me, the nightmares that woke me up at 3 a.m. every night, those were real. I started researching, spending hours at libraries and on library computers in the towns I stopped in, looking for missing truckers, unexplained disappearances on Nevada highways. There were more than you'd think. Way more. Singles and pairs vanishing without a trace. Trucks found abandoned, sometimes with the engines still running. 3 months after my escape, I found an article from 1987. A trucker named Wallace Brennan had stumbled into a police station in Ely, Nevada, claiming he'd escaped from a cannibal cult operating out of a renovated diner. He said they'd held him for 6 days, trying to force him to eat human flesh. The police investigated but found nothing. No diner, no cult, no evidence. Brennan was committed to a psychiatric facility. He hanged himself a week later. The article included a photo of Brennan. He looked exactly like I felt. Hollow-eyed, haunted, desperate to be believed. I kept digging. Found similar stories going back decades, different details but the same core elements. A diner in the desert. People who weren't quite right. Food that was too perfect. Truckers who escaped but could never find the place again. Then, 6 months after my escape, I found something that made my blood run cold. It was a photo from 1952, from a newspaper archive in Carson City. The headline read, "New Diner Opens on Highway 95. It showed a group of people standing in front of a pristine new building. The Silver Desert Diner, the sign read clearly. And there, in the front row, wearing a waitress uniform and that same not-quite-right smile, was Minerva Blackwood. Exactly the same, not aged a day in over 70 years. Standing next to her, in a cook's apron, was Silas Grimm. The caption listed their names, along with the others. All the names were different back then, but the faces... I recognized some of those faces. They'd been in the hallway that night, moving in the shadows. I stopped researching after that. Some knowledge is too heavy to carry. I changed routes, started driving East Coast runs only. Stayed away from the desert, from those long, empty stretches of highway where reality seems thin. But it didn't matter. They'd marked me, somehow. I could feel it. The food cravings started about a year later. Not for normal food, but for meat. Specific meat. The kind that looked too perfect, tasted too good. I'd find myself at truck stop diners, staring at other customers' plates, my mouth watering in ways that frightened me. Then came the dreams, not nightmares anymore, but something worse. Dreams where I was back at the Silver Desert Diner, sitting at the counter, eating that meatloaf. And in the dreams, it tasted even better than I remembered. I'd wake up with the flavor still in my mouth, my stomach growling for more. 2 years after my escape, I saw her again. Not in Nevada, but at a rest stop in Pennsylvania. 2 a.m., foggy night, nearly empty parking lot. I was refilling my coffee when I glanced through the window, and there she was. Minerva Blackwood, standing by my truck, just watching the diner, waiting. I dropped the coffee, the mug shattering on the floor. When I looked again, she was gone. But there was a note under my windshield wiper. Just 4 words. "You'll come back eventually." She was right. The hunger was getting worse. Normal food started tasting like ash. I was losing weight again, my body rejecting everything except what I couldn't have, what I wouldn't let myself want. I started seeing them more often after that. Silas at a way station in Ohio. Minerva at a fuel stop in Indiana. Other faces I recognized from that night, scattered across the country like they were following me, or waiting for me to break. 3 years now. 3 years since I escaped the Silver Desert Diner. I'm writing this in a motel room in Missouri, trying to document what happened while I still can, while I'm still me, because I can feel it happening. The change Minerva talked about. My teeth feel different, sharper. My eyes see better in the dark. And the hunger, God, the hunger never stops now. I catch myself looking at other drivers differently. Not as people, but as something else. Something that needs to be fed. I know what I'm becoming. I've known for months now. The food at the diner, even the little I consumed that first night, it did something to me. Changed me at some fundamental level. I'm turning into one of them. Slowly, fighting at every step of the way, but inevitably. Last week, I found myself on Highway 95 again. I'd told myself I was taking a shortcut, but that was a lie. I was looking for the exit, looking for the diner. Part of me, a growing part, wanted to go back, wanted to finish what they'd started. I didn't find it, not yet, but I know it's out there, waiting. And I know that one night, when the hunger becomes unbearable, when the last of my humanity finally slips away, I'll find that exit again. I'll pull into that parking lot, and Minerva will be there smiling that wrong smile, welcoming me home. They don't force you to become one of them. That's the real horror of it. They just start the process, then let time and hunger do the rest. Let you come back on your own, defeated and desperate, ready to embrace what you've become. I've left instructions with a lawyer. If I disappear, this document gets sent to every major news outlet, every trucking association, every law enforcement agency in Nevada. Maybe someone will believe it. Maybe someone will investigate. Maybe they'll find the Silver Desert Diner and shut it down. But I doubt it, because I'm starting to understand now. The diner doesn't stay in one place. It moves, appears where it's needed, where hungry travelers pass through. It's not a building, it's a trap, a web, and once you're caught in it, even if you escape, you're never really free. If you're a trucker reading this, and you're driving through Nevada late at night, and you see a diner that shouldn't be there, glowing in the desert like a promise of comfort and food, keep driving. Don't stop. Don't even slow down. No matter how hungry you are, no matter how tired, keep going. Because the Silver Desert Diner doesn't just feed you, it feeds on you. And once it has a taste, it never lets go. I can hear them calling me now, not with voices, but with something deeper. A pull in my bones, in my blood. The hunger is so strong I can barely think. I know what I have to do to make it stop. I know where I have to go. I'm sorry, I tried to fight it. I tried to warn you, but I'm so very, very hungry, and only they know how to feed what I've become. October in the Nevada desert is deceptive. The days still burn hot enough to make you sweat through your shirt, but the nights turn cold without warning. The temperature can drop 30 degrees in an hour, leaving you shivering in the same cab where you were sweating just moments before. My name is Cassius Thornfield, and I've been running freight through these desert highways for 18 years. 18 years of watching the seasons change, of learning every curve and straightaway, every truck stop and way station. You'd think after all that time, nothing could surprise you anymore. You'd be wrong. It was a Wednesday night just past 10 o'clock. I was hauling a load of construction equipment from Salt Lake City down to Phoenix, taking Highway 93 through the eastern edge of Nevada. It's a lonely stretch of road, especially at night. Miles and miles of nothing but sagebrush, rock formations, and the occasional glimpse of wildlife in your headlights. The kind of road where you can drive for hours without seeing another vehicle, where your CB radio picks up nothing but static, where cell phone service is just a memory. I'd been making good time, planning to push through to Kingman before stopping for the night. The weather was clear, the road was dry, and my old Kenworth was running smooth as silk. Just another routine haul, another paycheck, another 1,000 miles to add to the millions I'd already logged. Then I saw the deer. It was lying in the middle of my lane, a massive buck with antlers that spread like tree branches. Fresh kill by the look of it, probably hit within the last hour. Blood was still pooling on the asphalt, black as oil in my headlights. No other vehicles around, so whoever hit it had just kept going. Happened all the time out here. City folks in their SUVs probably didn't even know what they'd hit until they got home and saw the damage to their front end. I started to slow down, planning to steer around it. But as I got closer, I noticed something that made me bring the truck to a complete stop. The deer wasn't just lying there randomly. It had been arranged, positioned. Its legs were stretched out symmetrically, its head turned at a precise angle. Someone had taken the time to move it after it died. That should have been my first warning. I sat there for a moment, engine idling, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. In all my years on the road, I'd seen plenty of roadkill. Deer, elk, coyotes, even the occasional cow that had wandered through a broken fence. But I'd never seen one arranged like this. It looked almost ceremonial, like some kind of offering or warning. The smart thing would have been to drive around it and keep going, but the way it was positioned, right in the center of the lane, there wasn't much room to maneuver. The shoulder was soft sand on the right, a drop-off on the left. With a fully loaded trailer, I couldn't risk it. I was going to have to move the deer. I grabbed my work gloves and a flashlight from the cab, then climbed down. The night air was crisp, carrying the scent of sage and something else, something metallic and wrong. Blood, obviously, but mixed with something chemical, like antifreeze or formaldehyde. As I walked toward the deer, my flashlight beam swept across the road. That's when I saw the other things, small, white objects scattered around the carcass, forming a rough circle. At first, I thought they were rocks or trash, but as I got closer, I realized what they really were. Bones. Small bones, picked clean and bleached white, arranged in patterns I couldn't understand. My skin started to crawl. This wasn't just weird anymore, this was deliberate. Someone had done this on purpose, turned this stretch of highway into some kind of macabre display. But why? And more importantly, were they still around? I swept my flashlight across the desert on both sides of the road. Nothing but shadows and scrub brush. but shadows can hide a lot in the desert. I'd learned that the hard way over the years. The open space that looks empty during the day becomes a maze of hiding spots at night. I decided to work fast, get the deer off the road, and get out of there. I bent down, grabbed the buck's front legs, and started to pull. It was heavier than I expected, probably 200 pounds of dead weight. As I dragged it toward the shoulder, something fell out from underneath it. A human hand. I dropped the deer and stumbled backward, my heart hammering in my chest. The hand was pale, almost gray in the flashlight beam, with dirt caked under the fingernails. It was attached to an arm, which disappeared back under the deer's body. There was a person under there. A dead person. My first instinct was to run, get back in my truck and drive away as fast as possible. Pretend I'd never seen any of this. But I couldn't. If someone was hurt, if there was even a chance they were still alive, I had to check. That's just basic human decency. I took a deep breath, steadied my nerves, and went back to the deer. Working quickly, I rolled the carcass to the side, revealing what was underneath. It was a woman, young, maybe mid-20s. She was wearing jeans and a torn flannel shirt. Her eyes were closed, her face peaceful, like she was sleeping. But the amount of blood pooled beneath her told a different story. She'd been dead for a while. I reached for my cell phone, hoping against hope that I might have a signal. Nothing. Not even a single bar. I was going to have to drive to find help, to find somewhere I could call the police. But first, I needed to check for identification. The police would want to know who she was. I knelt beside her, trying not to look at the wounds on her torso, trying to stay clinical and detached. Her pockets were empty. No wallet, no phone, nothing. That's when I noticed the tattoo on her wrist. A black crow in flight, incredibly detailed. Below it, a name in cursive script. Isadora. Isadora Crow. Somehow, even then, I knew that name was going to haunt me. I stood up, ready to head back to my truck, when I heard it. The sound of an engine approaching from the north. Finally, I thought. Another driver. Someone who could help, or at least be a witness to what I'd found. The vehicle came into view, its lights cutting through the darkness. It was a police cruiser, Nevada Highway Patrol by the markings. Relief flooded through me. I wouldn't have to drive for help after all. The authorities were already here. The cruiser pulled up behind my truck, its spotlight sweeping across the scene. I raised my hand to shield my eyes from the glare. The driver's door opened, and an officer stepped out. Tall, well-built, moving with the controlled confidence of someone used to being in charge. "Evening," he called out, his hand resting on his service weapon. "Everything all right here?" "Officer, thank God," I said, walking toward him. "There's a body, under the deer, a woman. She's dead." The officer moved closer, his face coming into view under the streetlight. He was younger than I expected, maybe early 30s, with sharp features and pale blue eyes that seemed to glow in the darkness. His nameplate read V. Ashford. "A body, you say?" Officer Ashford's voice was calm, almost casual. "Well, that's certainly unexpected. Why don't you show me?" I led him to where Isadora Crow lay beside the deer carcass. He stood there for a long moment, studying the scene with those strange, pale eyes. Then he knelt down, examining the body with practiced efficiency. "How did you find her?" he asked, not looking up. The deer was blocking the road. When I went to move it, I found her underneath. "Interesting." He stood up, brushing dirt off his knees. "And you are?" "Cassius Thornfield. I'm a trucker, just passing through." "Mr. Thornfield." He repeated my name slowly, like he was tasting it. "Well, this is quite a situation we have here. I'm going to need you to come with me." "Come with you? Where? Don't you need to call this in, get a coroner out here?" Officer Ashford smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. All in due time. First, I need to take your statement. Properly. Can't do that out here on the side of the road, can we? Something was off about him. The way he moved, the way he talked, the way he looked at the body like it was just another piece of roadkill. Every instinct I'd developed over 18 years on the road was screaming at me to get away from this man. I think I should wait here, I said, with my truck until more officers arrive. I'm afraid I can't allow that. His hand moved back to his weapon. Not drawing it, just resting there. A subtle threat. This is a crime scene now. You're a witness, possibly a suspect. I need you to come with me. A suspect? I just found her. I was trying to help. Of course you were. That cold smile again. But you understand, I have to follow procedure. Now, are you going to come willingly, or do I need to make this official? I looked at his cruiser, then back at my truck. Something was very wrong here. But what choice did I have? He was a cop. I had to comply. Let me just lock up my rig, I said. Leave it. It'll be fine. He put his hand on my shoulder, his grip firm. Too firm. We won't be long. As he guided me toward his cruiser, I took one last look at Isadora Crow's body lying in the road. The bones I'd seen earlier, the arranged deer, the positioned corpse, it was all connected somehow. And Officer Virgil Ashford, with his pale eyes and cold smile, was part of it. I just didn't know how big a part yet. The inside of his cruiser smelled wrong. That's the first thing I noticed. It should have smelled like coffee and disinfectant, maybe a hint of cigarette smoke. Every cop car I'd ever been in had that same institutional smell, but this one smelled like copper and dirt, with an underlying sweetness that made my stomach turn. Buckle up, Ashford said, starting the engine. Safety first. He pulled away from my truck, heading south on Highway 93, the wrong direction for the nearest police station, which was north in Ely. I knew, because I'd been there once, years ago, to report a drunk driver who'd nearly run me off the road. Where are we going? I asked. Substation, he replied, his eyes fixed on the road. Closer than the main office. I'd never heard of any substation out here, but I kept my mouth shut. The radio in his cruiser was silent. No chatter, no dispatcher, nothing. In my experience, cop radios were never silent. There was always something, a check-in, a location update, something. We drove for about 15 minutes, the headlights cutting through the darkness. Then Ashford turned onto a dirt road I'd never noticed before, despite having driven this stretch hundreds of times. The road was rough, barely more than a trail, winding through rock formations and Joshua trees. The deeper we went into the desert, the more certain I became that Officer Virgil Ashford was not who he claimed to be. The dirt road wound through terrain I thought I knew, but nothing looked familiar in the darkness. Every shadow could have been a rock formation, or something else entirely. The cruiser's headlights created a tunnel of light ahead of us, but beyond that beam, the darkness was absolute. You've been driving these roads for how long? Ashford asked suddenly, breaking the silence that had stretched between us for the last 5 minutes. 18 years, I replied, keeping my voice steady despite the growing knot in my stomach. 18 years, he repeated, nodding slowly. That's a long time. You must have seen some interesting things out here. The desert's full of surprises. Indeed it is. He glanced at me, those pale eyes catching the dashboard light. Tell me, Mr. Thornfield, in all those years, how many bodies have you found? None, until tonight. Really? That's surprising. These highways are dangerous. Accidents happen all the time. Hikers get lost, migrants die of thirst, People dump their problems out here thinking the desert will hide their secrets." He paused, letting that sink in. "But the desert always gives up its secrets eventually. Always." The road got rougher, and I had to brace myself against the door as the cruiser bounced over rocks and ruts. We'd been driving for 20 minutes now, far longer than it should have taken to reach any kind of police facility. My truck was miles behind us, alone on the highway with Isadora Crow's body. This was all wrong. "How much further?" I asked. "Not far now." We crested a small rise, and below us I could see lights. Not many, just a few buildings clustered together in a valley between two ridges. It looked like an old mining camp, the kind that dotted the Nevada desert, abandoned when the ore ran out. But these buildings had lights in the windows, and I could see vehicles parked outside. "This doesn't look like a police substation," I said. Ashford pulled to a stop in front of the largest building, a 2-story structure that might have been a company office back in the mining days. The wood siding was weathered gray, and the windows were covered with bars that looked newer than the building itself. "Appearances can be deceiving," he said, turning off the engine. "Come on, let's get this over with." I didn't move. "I want to call my dispatcher, let them know where I am. No cell service out here, you can call from inside. Then I'll use your radio." He smiled that cold smile again. "Radio's broken. Has been for weeks. Budget cuts, you know. Now, are you going to get out, or do I need to encourage you?" His hand moved to his weapon again, but this time when he shifted, his jacket opened slightly, and I saw something that made my blood run cold. His badge was wrong. Not just a little off, but completely wrong. It looked like something you'd buy at a costume shop, shiny and fake, with police written in the wrong font. He wasn't a real cop. He never had been. I had 2 choices: get out of the car and go along with whatever this was, hoping for a chance to escape later, or try to fight now while we were still in the vehicle. Neither option was good, but compliance might buy me time to figure out what was really going on. I got out of the car. The night air was cold, much colder than it had been on the highway. My breath misted in front of me as Ashford led me toward the building. As we got closer, I could hear voices inside, multiple people talking in low tones. The front door was heavy wood, reinforced with metal brackets. Ashford pushed it open, and we stepped inside. The interior was not what I expected. Instead of the rundown mining office I'd anticipated, it was clean, almost sterile. White walls, fluorescent lighting, the smell of disinfectant strong enough to make my eyes water. A long hallway stretched ahead of us, with doors on either side. It looked more like a medical facility than anything else. "This way," Ashford said, guiding me down the hall. We passed several doors, all closed, all unmarked. From behind one, I heard what sounded like crying. From another, a rhythmic thumping, like someone hitting the wall over and over. My unease was rapidly turning into genuine fear. At the end of the hall was a larger room, set up like an office. Behind a desk sat a woman in her 50s, gray hair pulled back in a severe bun, wearing what looked like medical scrubs. She looked up as we entered, her expression unreadable. "This is the one who found her?" she asked Ashford. "Yes, Cassius Thornfield, trucker. Says he was just passing through." The woman studied me with dark, intelligent eyes. "Mr. Thornfield, I'm Dr. Evelyn Marsh. Please have a seat." There was a chair in front of the desk. I sat down, trying to process what was happening. A doctor? What was a doctor doing out here in an abandoned mining camp? "I'm sure you're confused," Dr. Marsh said, folding her hands on the desk. "Let me explain. This is a research facility. We study certain phenomena that occur in the desert. Officer Ashford here isn't actually a police officer, as you've probably figured out. He's part of our security team." "Security for what?" I asked. What kind of research requires fake cops? The kind that the general public wouldn't understand. The kind that requires discretion. She opened a folder on her desk, revealing photographs. Crime scene photos by the look of them. Bodies in various states of decay, all found in the desert. Tell me, Mr. Thornfield, what do you know about the disappearances along Highway 93? Nothing. I mean, I've heard rumors. Truckers talk, but nothing specific. Over the past 5 years, 17 people have vanished along a 50-mile stretch of that highway. Their vehicles were found, but they were never seen again. Until recently, when bodies started turning up. Always in the same condition, always arranged in specific patterns. She showed me more photos. The bodies were positioned just like the deer had been, symmetrical, ceremonial, and around each one, those same small bones forming circles and symbols. We believe, Dr. Marsh continued, that someone is using this stretch of desert for something unprecedented. Not just murder, but something more complex. A kind of experiment, perhaps, or a ritual, we're not sure yet. And Isadora Crow was one of ours, and researcher who was investigating the patterns. She went missing 3 days ago. Dr. Marsh's expression tightened. Finding her body tonight was not unexpected, but it is unfortunate. So you're telling me you're some kind of private investigation team? Something like that. She stood up, walking to a cabinet against the wall. The question now, Mr. Thornfield, is what to do with you. What do you mean? I'm a witness. I found a body. I should be talking to the real police. The real police would contaminate the investigation. They'd bring in media attention, federal agencies. Everything we've worked for would be destroyed. She opened the cabinet, revealing rows of vials filled with clear liquid. No, I'm afraid we can't let that happen. My mouth went dry. You're going to kill me. Kill you? No, Mr. Thornfield. We're not killers. We're scientists, researchers. We're trying to understand what's happening out here to stop it. She selected one of the vials, holding it up to the light. But we do need to ensure your cooperation. And your silence. I won't tell anyone. I swear. Just let me go. I'm afraid it's not that simple. She nodded to Ashford, who moved behind my chair. I felt his hands on my shoulders, holding me in place. You see, whoever is doing this, whoever is arranging these bodies and conducting these rituals, they're not working alone. They have help. People who look normal, who blend in, who could be anyone. Even a trucker who's been driving these roads for 18 years. You think I'm involved? That's insane. Is it? You were alone on a deserted highway at exactly the right time to find the body. You knew exactly where to look. You didn't seem surprised by what you found. I was surprised. I called for help. You stood there examining the scene for several minutes before Officer Ashford arrived. What were you really doing, Mr. Thornfield? Checking your work? Making sure everything was positioned correctly? I tried to stand, but Ashford's grip was like iron. This is crazy. You can't just hold me here. Actually, we can. Dr. Marsh approached with the vial and a syringe. This is a mild sedative. It will help you relax while we verify your story. If you're telling the truth, you have nothing to worry about. And if you decide I'm not... She didn't answer, just nodded to Ashford again. I felt a sharp pain in my neck as the needle went in. The world immediately began to blur around the edges. The truth always comes out, Mr. Thornfield, Marsh said, her voice seeming to come from very far away, one way or another. The last thing I saw before the darkness took me was a map on the wall behind her desk. A map of Highway 93 with red pins marking locations. 17 pins for 17 disappearances. But there were other colors too. Blue pins, green pins, yellow pins. dozens of them scattered across the desert. Whatever was happening out here was bigger than just 17 missing people. Much bigger. When I woke up, I was in a different room. This one had no windows, just white walls and a single fluorescent light that hummed constantly. I was lying on a narrow cot, still wearing my clothes but missing my boots and belt. My head felt like it was stuffed with cotton, and my mouth tasted like copper. I sat up slowly, waiting for the room to stop spinning. There was a door, metal with a small window at eye level. I stumbled over to it and looked out. Another hallway, this one narrower than the first. I tried the handle. Locked, of course. "Hey!" I shouted, my voice hoarse. "Hey, someone! Let me out!" No response. I pounded on the door, the sound echoing off the walls. Still nothing. I went back to the cot and sat down, trying to think through the fog in my brain. How long had I been out? Hours? Days? There was no way to tell. No clock, no window to judge the time by. Then I heard something. Footsteps in the hallway getting closer. Not the measured pace of Ashford or Dr. Marsh, but something shuffling, uneven. The footsteps stopped right outside my door. "Hello?" I called out. "You're awake?" The voice was female, young, familiar somehow. "Good. We don't have much time. Who are you?" "Someone who wants to get out of here as much as you do." There was a scraping sound, metal on metal. They think I'm sedated, but I've been spitting out the pills. Listen carefully. This place isn't what they told you. It's not a research facility. Then what is it? It's a cleanup operation. They're not investigating the disappearances. They're covering them up. The door clicked open. Standing in the hallway was a young woman in a hospital gown. She was thin, too thin, with dark circles under her eyes. But what made my blood run cold was the tattoo on her wrist. A black crow in flight. "You're Isadora Crow," I whispered, "but you're supposed to be dead." She smiled grimly. "That wasn't me you found under the deer. That was my sister, Isabella. Twins. They killed her 3 days ago when she came looking for me." Her expression hardened. "And now they're going to kill us both unless we get out of here right now." "How do we—" "Shh!" She held up a hand, listening. "They're coming, the real ones, the ones who arrange the bodies, the ones who've been hunting people on Highway 93 for years." She grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "Dr. Marsh and Ashford aren't researchers. They're facilitators. They provide the subjects." Subjects for what? For them. The feeders, the ones who've been here since before the mines, before the roads, before everything. The desert belongs to them, and we're just meat. Footsteps echoed from somewhere below us. Multiple sets, moving in unison. "Run," Isadora said. "Now." We ran down the hallway, our socks silent on the linoleum floor. Behind us, I could hear doors opening, voices calling out. But they weren't speaking English. It was something else, something that hurt to hear, like words being spoken backward and inside out. "This way," Isadora hissed, pulling me into a stairwell. We went up, taking the steps 2 at a time. My legs were still shaky from whatever they'd drugged me with, but adrenaline kept me moving. We burst onto the roof, the cold night air hitting us like a slap. The desert stretched out in all directions, dark and endless. Below, I could see vehicles gathered around the building. Not just Ashford's fake police cruiser, but vans, trucks, even what looked like an ambulance. "There," Isadora pointed to the edge of the roof. "Fire escape. It's our only chance." But as we ran toward it, figures emerged from the shadows. Not Ashford or Dr. Marsh, but others. They moved wrong, joints bending in ways that shouldn't be possible, their faces hidden in darkness. And their hands. Their hands had too many fingers. The subjects become them, Isadora whispered. After enough time, enough feeding, we become like them. That's what happened to the 17. They're not dead, they're changed. One of the figures stepped into the moonlight and I saw its face. It had been human once, but now it was something else. The features were stretched, distorted, the mouth too wide, the eyes too large. It opened that impossible mouth and spoke in a voice that sounded like grinding stone. Cassius Thornfield. You were chosen, just as Isadora was chosen, just as all who travel these roads are chosen. The desert must feed. The desert's not alive, I said, though even as I said it, I wasn't sure I believed it. Everything is alive, the thing replied. The rocks, the sand, the space between, and it's hungry, so very hungry. We are its mouth, its teeth, its throat. We consume so it may consume. More figures emerged, surrounding us. There was nowhere to run. The things that surrounded us on the roof weren't human anymore, but they had been once. I could see it in the way they moved, muscle memory fighting against their new forms. One of them still wore the remnants of a trucker's cap, stretched and torn to fit its elongated skull. Another had a wedding ring fused into a finger that had grown too large for it to ever come off. There's no point in running, the one who had spoken said. Its voice was getting easier to understand, as if my brain was adjusting to its wrongness. The desert has already marked you. You've breathed its air, walked its paths, eaten food grown from its soil. You belong to it now, just as we do. You're insane, I said, though the word felt inadequate. You're all insane. Insanity is a human concept, it replied. We've moved beyond such limitations. Isadora pressed close to me, her whole body trembling. They were like us once, she whispered. The missing truckers, the hikers, the tourists, they were taken, changed, turned into these things, and they help capture more people to continue the cycle. Why? I asked. What's the point? The thing that had been a trucker tilted its head at an impossible angle. The desert must grow. It must spread. Each person we take, each transformation, extends its reach. Soon, it won't just be Highway 93. It will be all the highways, all the roads, all the paths that cross this land. That's impossible. Is it? Dr. Marsh's voice came from behind us. She had emerged from the stairwell, along with Ashford and several others in medical scrubs. But now I could see they weren't quite right either. Their movements were too fluid. Their eyes reflected light like a cat's. Mr. Thornfield, you've driven these roads for 18 years. Haven't you felt it? The way certain stretches seem longer at night? The way your radio picks up stations that shouldn't exist? The way you sometimes see things in your mirrors that aren't there when you look back? I had felt those things. Every trucker had. We just didn't talk about it. Wrote it off as highway hypnosis, tired eyes, too much coffee, or not enough sleep. The desert has been calling to you for years, she continued. We just help answer that call. By killing people, by turning them into monsters, by evolving them, by helping them become part of something greater than themselves. She pulled out another syringe, this one filled with something dark and viscous. This is the catalyst, a combination of organic compounds found only in certain parts of the desert, mixed with, well, let's call it the essence of those who came before. One injection, and the transformation begins. It's quite painless, actually. Some even describe it as euphoric. Stay back, I warned, though I had nothing to defend myself with. There's nowhere to go, Mr. Thornfield. Even if you could get past us, even if you could make it back to your truck, where would you run? The desert is everywhere. And now that you know the truth, now that you've seen us, You can't be allowed to leave unchanged. The circle of transformed beings was closing in. Their wrong-jointed movements were hypnotic in their alienness. I could smell them now, a scent like hot sand and old copper, with something organic underneath, like mushrooms growing in the dark. But Isadora wasn't trembling anymore. She was counting. 3, she whispered. 2, 1. The explosion came from below, shaking the entire building. Fire erupted from the first-floor windows, and the transformed beings stumbled, their attention diverted. Now! Isadora grabbed my hand and ran toward the edge of the roof. Are you crazy? We'll die! Maybe, but definitely if we stay. She didn't slow down. I looked back. The creatures were recovering from their surprise, starting to pursue. Dr. Marsh was shouting orders. Ashford had drawn his gun. There was no choice. We jumped. For a moment, we were flying. The desert floor rushed up to meet us, and I thought this was it. This was how I died. Not transformed into some desert monster, but splattered on the rocks below. Then we hit something soft. A massive pile of sand that hadn't been there before, positioned exactly where we needed it. We rolled down its slope, the sand getting in our mouths, our eyes, our clothes, but we were alive. How? I gasped, spitting out grit. I've been here for 2 weeks, Isadora said, pulling me to my feet. You think I didn't prepare an escape route? The explosion was just some chemicals from their lab I managed to steal. The sand pile took longer, every night, bucket by bucket, when they thought I was sedated. Behind us, the building was burning. I could see figures on the roof, but they weren't following. Maybe they couldn't. Maybe jumping from that height would damage even their transformed bodies. We need to move, Isadora said. The fire will bring the real authorities eventually, but those things will scatter before then. They'll be looking for us. We ran into the desert, our socks shredding on rocks and thorns within minutes. The October night was freezing, and without proper clothes or shoes, we were going to be in serious trouble soon. But Isadora seemed to know where she was going, leading me through a maze of rocks and ravines. There's an old miner's shack about a mile from here, she panted. I found it during one of my supervised walks. They don't know I know about it. The shack was little more than 4 walls and a partial roof, but it was shelter. Inside, Isadora pulled up a loose floorboard, revealing a cache of supplies: water bottles, energy bars, a first aid kit, and most importantly, a pair of work boots and a jacket. You really did plan this, I said, pulling on the boots. They were too small, but better than nothing. I'm a researcher, she said. Planning is what I do, or did before all this. She took a long drink of water, then passed me the bottle. My real name is Isadora Crow. I worked for the FBI. We'd been tracking the disappearances along Highway 93 for 2 years. When my sister Isabella and I discovered the pattern, I came out here undercover to investigate, and they caught you. They were expecting me. Someone in the bureau tipped them off. These people, these things, they have connections everywhere. Trucking companies, police departments, government agencies. They've been building their network for decades. So, what do? Who do we trust? No one. We get to your truck if it's still there. We drive to Las Vegas to the media. We go public with everything. It's the only way to protect ourselves. They can't disappear us if everyone's watching. We waited until just before dawn, then started walking. Isadora knew the way back to Highway 93, had memorized it during her captivity. As we walked, she told me more about what she'd learned. The transformations aren't random, she said. They choose people who won't be missed immediately. Truckers on long hauls, solo travelers, people with no close family. They keep them for weeks, sometimes months, slowly changing them with injections and feeding them things. What kind of things? You don't want to know, but it's part of the process. The diet changes your body chemistry, makes you more receptive to the transformation. That's why they have the fake diner scenarios, the arranged roadkill. It's all part of their hunting pattern. The diner, I said, remembering something. There are stories about a diner that appears and disappears on Highway 95. Truckers who stop there are never seen again. We know about that one. It's connected to this, part of the same network. The desert isn't just one entity, it's a colony spread across Nevada, parts of Arizona and Utah. Each group has its own hunting grounds, its own methods. We reached a ridge just as the sun was coming up, painting the desert in shades of gold and red. Below us, I could see Highway 93, and there, like a miracle, was my truck, still parked where I'd left it, though the deer and the body were gone. They cleaned up, Isadora said. No evidence. That's how they've gotten away with it for so long. We made our way down to the highway, constantly checking for any sign of pursuit. The truck was unlocked, my keys still in the ignition. Too easy. This had to be a trap. "Get in," I said, "but be ready to run." I turned the key. The engine roared to life, all gauges reading normal. I checked the mirrors, the sleeper cabin, even under the hood. Everything seemed fine. "Maybe they didn't expect us to make it this far," Isadora suggested. Maybe. But I didn't believe it. These things had been hunting for decades. They didn't make mistakes like this. We drove north toward Ely, the closest real town. The highway was empty, which wasn't unusual for this time of morning, but it felt ominous. Every shadow could hide one of those creatures. Every vehicle we passed could be part of their network. About 10 miles from where we'd started, I saw it in the mirror. A police cruiser gaining fast. "Company," I said. Isadora turned to look. "That's not Ashford. Real cop?" Only one way to find out. The cruiser hit its lights and siren. I could pull over, hope it was legitimate. Or I could run, confirm their suspicions if it was a real cop, but stay alive if it wasn't. "Don't stop," Isadora said. "Real cops don't patrol this stretch alone. It's always pairs because of the isolation." I pressed harder on the accelerator. The truck was heavy, loaded with construction equipment, but it had power. The speedometer climbed, 70, 75, 80. The cruiser kept pace easily. Then I saw the second cruiser, coming from ahead, heading straight for us. "Roadblock," I said. "I'd bet see." "Hold on." I yanked the wheel hard to the right, taking the truck off-road. We bounced over the rough terrain, the load shifting dangerously behind us. The cruisers followed, but they weren't built for this kind of driving. One got stuck in a sandy wash. The other hit a rock and spun out. But more were coming. I could see the dust clouds in the distance. "There!" Isadora pointed to a service road I hadn't noticed before. "That leads to the old military testing grounds. They won't follow us there." "Why not?" "Because even they're afraid of what's out there. The desert isn't the only thing that's been changing in Nevada. The bomb tests in the 50s, they woke something up. Something older than the desert, older than the things chasing us. Out of the frying pan," I muttered, but took the turn anyway. The service road was in worse shape than the dirt trail to the mining camp, barely more than 2 ruts in the hardpan, but it was heading away from our pursuers, and that was all that mattered. We drove for an hour, the landscape becoming increasingly desolate. The Joshua trees gave way to bare rock and sand. In the distance, I could see the remains of structures, concrete buildings half buried by decades of sandstorms. "Stop here," Isadora said suddenly. I pulled over next to what looked like an old checkpoint. The guard booth empty and filled with tumbleweeds. Why are we stopping? Because they're still following, just at a distance. And because I need to tell you something. She turned to face me, her expression grave. I'm not really FBI. I mean, I was, but that's not why I'm here. My sister and I, we're part of something else. Something that's been fighting these things for a long time. What are you talking about? The transformations, the desert cult. It's all real, but it's not new. It's been happening for centuries, maybe longer, and there have always been people fighting against it. Native tribes first, then settlers, now us. We call ourselves the Watchers. This is insane. Yes, it is, but it's also true, and right now you have a choice. You can drive to Las Vegas, try to forget all this happened, hope they don't find you. Or you can help us stop them. How? They're monsters. They have connections everywhere. But they have weaknesses too. The transformations aren't perfect. The changed ones can't stand certain frequencies of sound. They need specific minerals in their diet to maintain their forms. And most importantly, they're centralized. There's a source, a place where it all started. If we can find it, destroy it, we can stop the spread. And you know where this place is? Not yet, but you do. What? No, I don't. Think about it. 18 years driving these roads. You've seen things, felt things. There's a place, somewhere on your routes, where the feeling is strongest, where the air feels different, where time seems to move strangely. You know where it is, even if you don't realize it. I wanted to deny it, but she was right. There was a place, a stretch of Highway 50, the so-called loneliest road in America, where I always felt like I was being watched, where my instruments would go haywire, where the road seemed to stretch longer than it should. Highway 50, I said. Between Austin and Eureka, there's something there. Then that's where we need to go. It's a trap. They'll be expecting us. Probably. But we have something they don't expect. She pulled out a device from her pocket, something that looked like a modified cell phone. This transmits on a frequency that causes them pain. It won't stop them, but it'll slow them down. And I've already sent our location to the other Watchers. Help is coming. How many Watchers are there? Not enough. Never enough. But we do what we can. I looked out at the desolate landscape, then back at her. This young woman who had planned an elaborate escape, who had survived 2 weeks of captivity, who was now asking me to drive into certain danger. All right, I said. But we do this my way. I know these roads better than anyone. If we're going to find this source, we need to be smart about it. Agreed. So, what's your way? First, we don't go direct. They'll expect that. We take the back roads, the old mining trails. It'll take longer, but it'll keep them guessing. Second, we need supplies, real supplies. There's a truck stop about 30 miles east of here that's run by an old friend. He owes me favors. We can trust him. How can you be sure? Because he's seen them too. Lost his son to something on Highway 50 5 years ago. If anyone will help us, it's him. Isadora nodded. Then let's go. But Cassius, once we do this, there's no going back. They'll never stop hunting us. They're already hunting us, I pointed out. At least this way, we're hunting them back. The truck stop my friend Jeremiah Hawthorne ran was one of those places that existed between worlds. Not quite civilization, not quite wilderness. Just a cluster of fuel pumps, a repair shop, and a diner that served coffee strong enough to wake the dead, situated at the intersection of 2 forgotten highways that most modern maps didn't even show anymore. It took us 3 hours to get there, using routes I'd learned from old-timers when I first started driving. Mining roads, cattle trails, paths that hadn't seen regular traffic since the silver boom ended. Twice, we had to stop and move fallen rocks. Once, we had to wait for a herd of wild horses to cross. But we didn't see a single vehicle following us. "They're still out there," Isadora said, checking her device constantly. "This thing picks up their electromagnetic signature. They generate a specific frequency when they're in their transformed state. Right now, I'm reading at least 12 signals, spread out in a search pattern." 12, I muttered. "How many of these things are there total?" "We don't know. The Watchers have confirmed nests in Nevada, Arizona, Utah, and Southern California, but there could be more. They're good at hiding, at blending in when they need to." The truck stop appeared around a bend like a mirage, its ancient neon sign flickering in the midday sun. "Hawthorne's Haven, last stop for 100 miles. It wasn't lying. This was the edge of the real nowhere, where the desert stopped pretending to be anything but hostile. I pulled into the lot, parking between two other big rigs. Truckers I didn't recognize, which was unusual. I knew most of the drivers who used these back routes. "Stay here," I told Isadora. "Let me check it out first." "Not a chance. We stick together from now on." She was right. Splitting up was how people disappeared out here. The diner's door chimed when we entered, the same bell that had been there since 1962, when Jeremiah's father first opened the place. The interior hadn't changed much either. Red vinyl booths repaired with duct tape, a counter with swivel stools, walls covered with trucker memorabilia, and faded photographs of rigs that had passed through over the decades. Jeremiah was behind the counter, same as always. 6'4", built like a linebacker gone to seed, with arms covered in military tattoos from his time in Desert Storm. His hair had gone completely gray since I'd last seen him, and there were new lines around his eyes. "Cassius Thornfield," he said, not looking up from the coffee pot he was cleaning. "Heard you might be coming this way." "Heard from who?" Now he looked up, and his eyes were hard. "From them. They came through about an hour ago. 3 of them, pretending to be state troopers, asking about you, about any passengers you might have." His gaze shifted to Isadora. "They left something for you." He reached under the counter, and I tensed, ready to run. But what he pulled out was an envelope, my name written on it in handwriting that looked wrong, like someone had to remember how letters were supposed to be formed. I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a message. "Mr. Thornfield, you have something that belongs to us. Return her to the point of origin, and you may continue your life. Refuse, and you will join the others. You have 6 hours. Dr. Marsh." "They know we're here," Isadora said. "They know you were coming here," Jeremiah corrected. "But they don't know you're here now. I've got jammers running. Old military tech from my service days. Blocks all signals in a half-mile radius. Figured it might come in handy one day." "You know about them," I said. It wasn't a question. "Lost my boy to them 5 years back, Timothy. He was driving night runs, just like you. One day he calls me, says he's found something strange out on Highway 50, says there's a whole town that shouldn't exist. People who aren't quite right. Next day, his truck is found abandoned. No sign of him." Jeremiah's jaw tightened. Until 3 months later, when I saw him at a distance, at a rest stop near Tonopah. But it wasn't him anymore. The thing wearing his face, it looked at me and it smiled. That's when I knew they'd taken him, changed him into one of them. "I'm sorry," Isadora said softly. "Don't be sorry. Help me stop them." He looked at both of us. "I've been preparing for this. Gathering information, supplies, weapons. There's a network of us, people who've lost family to these things. We're not as organized as your Watchers, miss, but we're motivated." "What kind of weapons?" I asked. Regular guns won't stop them. No, but electricity does. High voltage disrupts their transformed state, forces them back into human form temporarily. And fire. They burn just like anything else, and they can't regenerate from ash. He led us into the back room, which looked more like a military arsenal than a storage area for a truck stop. Been collecting for 5 years. Tasers, cattle prods, flare guns, homemade flamethrowers. Not exactly legal, but neither is what they're doing. This is impressive, Isadora said, examining a modified shotgun that looked like it could fire electrified rounds. But we need more than weapons. We need to find their source, their origin point. Highway 50, Jeremiah said immediately. Mile marker 237. That's where it all started. There's an old military installation there, supposedly decommissioned in 1971. But truckers have been reporting strange things there for decades. Lights in the sky, roads that lead nowhere, time distortions. Time distortions? I asked. Drivers go missing for hours, then show up with no memory of where they've been. Or they'll drive what should be a 30-minute stretch and arrive 3 hours late. Something's wrong with that whole area. Isadora was typing rapidly on her device. Mile marker 237. Yes, there's something here. The Watchers have a file on it. Operation Sandstorm, 1969 to 1971. Military experiments in biological weapons. No, that's not right. Biological integration. They were trying to create soldiers who could survive in extreme environments. By turning them into monsters, I asked. By integrating them with extremophile organisms found in the desert. Bacteria that could survive without water, in extreme heat, in high radiation. She looked up, her face pale. They didn't stop the experiments because they failed. They stopped because they succeeded too well. The test subjects began changing in ways they couldn't control. And now those test subjects are running around Nevada, turning truckers into more of themselves, Jeremiah said. We need to end this. It won't be easy, Isadora warned. If this installation is their origin point, it'll be heavily defended. And we have less than 5 hours before they come looking for us. Then we'd better move fast. Jeremiah started loading weapons into bags. I've got 2 other drivers here who lost family to these things. They'll help. That gives us 5 fighters. Against potentially dozens of those creatures, I pointed out. Yeah, well, nobody said it would be easy. We spent the next hour preparing. Jeremiah introduced us to the other drivers. Rex Limestone, a grizzled veteran who'd lost his brother 2 years ago, and Tommy Blackford, barely 25, whose girlfriend had vanished on Highway 50 just last month. They'd both seen enough to believe our story without question. The plan is simple, Jeremiah said, spreading a map on the diner counter. We take 3 trucks, approach from different directions. The installation is here, in this valley. There's only one main road in, but there are 2 service roads from the old mining days. We hit them fast, hard, and we don't stop until we find whatever's at the center of this. What about the transformed ones? Rex asked. The regular weapons won't stop them. That's where these come in. Isadora produced several small devices from her bag. Sonic emitters. They generate a frequency that causes extreme pain to the transformed. Won't kill them, but it'll disable them long enough for the electrical weapons to work. And if we find survivors? Tommy asked hopefully. People who haven't been fully transformed yet. We save who we can, Jeremiah said firmly. But we don't let sentiment get us killed. Some of these people have been changed for years. There's no coming back from that. We loaded up as the sun started its descent toward the horizon. I was in my truck with Isadora, Jeremiah and Rex took Jeremiah's modified pickup, and Tommy drove his rig. We had radios tuned to a frequency the transformed supposedly couldn't monitor, though I wasn't betting my life on that. The drive to mile marker 237 took 2 hours. As we got closer, I could feel it, that wrongness Jeremiah had described. The air felt thicker, charged with static electricity. My instruments started acting up, the compass spinning randomly, the CB picking up transmissions that sounded like they were coming from underground. There, Isadora pointed to a dirt road almost invisible in the twilight. That's the North Service Road. Tommy should be approaching from the south. We turned off the highway, killing our lights and relying on the last rays of sunlight to navigate. The road descended into a valley that shouldn't have existed, a deep gouge in the earth that didn't appear on any map. At the bottom of the valley sat the installation. It wasn't abandoned. Lights blazed from windows, vehicles were parked in neat rows, and figures moved between buildings with purpose. But something was wrong with the geometry of the place. Buildings seemed to shift position when you weren't looking directly at them. Distances were hard to judge. "My device is going crazy," Isadora whispered. "There are dozens of signatures down there, maybe more." "Too late to turn back now," I said, though every instinct was screaming at me to run. Jeremiah's voice crackled over the radio. "We're in position. Tommy reports same. On my signal, we move. Remember, speed and violence. Don't give them time to organize." We waited, engines idling, hearts pounding. Then, "Go! Go! Go!" I floored it, the truck roaring down the slope toward the installation. The other vehicles converged from their positions, headlights blazing, horns blaring. The figures in the compound scattered, some running for cover, others standing their ground. That's when I saw them clearly for the first time in full light. The transformed ones. They were worse than I'd imagined. Some still looked mostly human, just stretched and distorted. Others had changed so much they barely had recognizable features anymore. They moved like spiders, all wrong angles and too many joints. We crashed through the fence, Isadora activating the sonic emitters. The sound was barely audible to us, but the transformed ones reacted immediately, clutching at their heads, falling to their knees. We had seconds before they adapted. "The main building," Isadora shouted. "That's where the source will be." It was a concrete structure, probably a bunker, with heavy doors and barred windows. We drove straight at it, using the truck as a battering ram. The doors buckled but didn't break. That's when things went wrong. The ground beneath us began to move. Not like an earthquake, but like something enormous was stirring underneath. Cracks appeared in the earth spreading outward from the bunker, and from those cracks came something I'll never forget. It wasn't solid, wasn't liquid, wasn't gas. It was all three and none of them, a writhing mass of tissue and sand and something that hurt to look at. It rose from the ground like a wave engulfing one of the parked vehicles, and when it receded, the vehicle was gone. Not destroyed, not moved, gone. "What is that thing?" Tommy's voice over the radio, high with panic. "The source," Isadora breathed. "It's not a machine or a weapon. It's alive, the whole installation, the whole valley. It's one enormous organism." The transformed ones were recovering from the sonic attack, moving toward us with renewed purpose. But they weren't attacking. They were herding us toward the writhing mass. "We need to burn it," Jeremiah's voice steady despite everything. "All of it, the whole valley." "We don't have enough firepower for that," Rex protested. "No, but they do." Jeremiah pointed to a cluster of fuel tanks on the edge of the compound. "Those are for the generators, probably 10,000 gallons of diesel." "That's suicide," I said. "We'd never get clear in time. Then we'd better move fast." What followed was chaos. We scattered, each vehicle targeting different fuel tanks while fighting off the transformed ones. The electrical weapons worked, but only temporarily. They'd go down, convulsing, then get back up angrier than before. I rammed my truck into the nearest tank, rupturing it. Diesel fuel spilled across the ground, forming pools that reflected the crazy lights of the installation. Isadora leaned out the window with a flare gun, ready to ignite it, when something grabbed the truck. It was Dr. Marsh, but not as I'd last seen her. She'd begun to transform, her limbs elongated, her face stretching into something inhuman. She tore the door off its hinges with impossible strength. "You don't understand," she said, her voice distorted but still recognizable. "This is evolution. This is the future. Humanity's time is ending. We're just the beginning of what comes next." Isadora shot her with the electrified shotgun. Dr. Marsh screamed, a sound that shattered the truck's windows and fell back. But more were coming. Dozens of them swarming toward us. "Now!" Jeremiah shouted. "Light it now!" Flares arced through the air from 3 directions. The fuel ignited with a whoosh that sucked the air from my lungs. Fire spread across the compound, following the diesel trails, reaching the ruptured tanks. The first explosion knocked me flat. The second lifted the truck onto 2 wheels. By the third, the whole valley was an inferno. The organism, the living valley, reacted to the fire like any living thing would. It writhed, it screamed without sound, it tried to retreat back into the earth. But the fire followed it down, into the cracks, into the tunnels it had carved beneath the desert. "Move! Move! Move!" I grabbed Isadora and ran for the truck. Others were doing the same, racing for their vehicles as the ground began to collapse. We drove like hell itself was chasing us, which wasn't far from the truth. Behind us, the valley was consuming itself, folding inward as the organism died. The transformed ones caught in the collapse didn't even try to escape. They just stood there, watching their world end. We made it to the highway just as the biggest explosion yet lit up the night sky. A pillar of fire that could probably be seen from Las Vegas. The ground shook so hard I nearly lost control of the truck. Then, suddenly, silence. We pulled over a mile down the road, all of us, and looked back. Where the valley had been, there was now just a smoking crater. The installation, the organism, the transformed ones, all gone. "Is it over?" Tommy asked. "This one is," Isadora said, checking her device. "I'm not picking up any signatures, but there are other nests, other installations. This was just one head of the Hydra. Then, we keep fighting," Jeremiah said. "We know they can be killed now. We know they can be stopped." But I was looking at my hands on the steering wheel, and I noticed something that made my blood run cold. There, on my palm where Dr. Marsh had grabbed me, was a small mark, like a burn, but not quite. It was the same color as the organism had been, that impossible color between solid and liquid. I didn't tell the others, not then, but I knew what it meant. The transformation doesn't always happen through injections or feeding. Sometimes, just contact is enough. Just a touch from something that used to be human. It's been 3 weeks since we destroyed the installation at mile marker 237. The official story is that an old military munitions depot exploded, the result of improperly stored chemicals. The government cordoned off the area, declared it an environmental hazard. No one's allowed within 5 miles of the crater. Isadora and the Watchers have gone after other nests. Jeremiah turned his truck stop into an unofficial headquarters for drivers who've encountered the transformed. They share information, plan strikes, try to save who they can. But me, I'm still driving, still hauling loads across the desert, because I can feel it growing inside me, that mark spreading slowly under my skin. Not painful, not even unpleasant. Just different. changing me cell by cell. I've left instructions with Jeremiah. When I stop checking in, when I go dark, he knows what to do. He promised he'd make it quick, clean. Fire, just like we used in the valley. It's the only way to be sure. Sometimes, late at night on empty highways, I catch myself thinking that maybe Dr. Marsh was right. Maybe this is evolution. Maybe fighting it is like trying to stop the tide. The desert has been here longer than humans, and it'll be here long after we're gone. Maybe it's just reclaiming what was always its own. But then I remember Isadora's sister, dead under that deer. I remember Timothy Hawthorne and all the others who were taken against their will. And I keep driving, keep fighting the change for as long as I can. Because that's what we do, us truckers. We keep moving forward, even when the road ahead is dark. Even when we know there's no good ending waiting for us. We drive because stopping means giving in, and giving in means becoming something that isn't human anymore. The mark on my hand has spread to my wrist now. I figure I have maybe a month before it reaches my heart. A month to help Jeremiah and the others find more nests, share what I know, maybe save a few more lives. It's not much, but it's something. And out here in the desert, where the highways stretch forever and the darkness hides impossible things, sometimes something is all you have. So, if you're driving through Nevada and you see a trucker parked by the side of the road just sitting in his cab, staring at nothing, maybe give him a wave. Maybe flash your lights. Remind him he's still human, still connected to the world of people and normal things. Because once that connection breaks, once the desert claims you, there's no coming back. December in the Nevada desert is a cruel joke. People think desert means hot, but they've never been on Highway 375 at 2 in the morning when the temperature drops below freezing and the wind cuts through your cab like a blade made of ice. My name is Leander Frost. And yes, I've heard all the jokes about my last name. 22 years I've been driving these routes, and I thought I'd seen everything the desert could throw at me. Breakdowns in the middle of nowhere. Flash floods that appear from clear skies, sandstorms that can strip paint off metal. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for what happened on December 18th, 2019. I was hauling a load of medical supplies from Sacramento to Albuquerque, taking the long route through Nevada to avoid storm systems in the Rockies. It was supposed to be a routine run, one I'd done dozens of times before. My dispatcher, Cordelia Stone, had called me that morning with the details. Cordelia had been handling my routes for 8 years, and she knew I preferred the night drives, especially in winter when the roads were empty and the desert was quiet. "Weather looks clear all the way through," she'd said over the phone. "But Leander, be careful out there. There've been reports of accidents on 375. Black ice, they're saying, though that doesn't make much sense given the conditions." "Since when does the desert make sense?" I'd replied, trying to keep the mood light. But something in her voice had bothered me. Cordelia wasn't one to worry unnecessarily. "Just check in more often than usual, okay? Every 2 hours instead of 4. Humor me." I'd agreed, though I didn't understand her concern at the time. Now I wish I'd listened to whatever instinct was making her nervous. The first 10 hours of the drive were uneventful. I'd made good time through California, crossed into Nevada as the sun was setting, painting the mountains in shades of purple and gold. By the time I reached the stretch of Highway 375, known as the extraterrestrial highway, it was fully dark, the kind of darkness you only get in the desert, where the nearest town might be 100 miles away. The stars were incredible that night. No moon, no light pollution, just millions of points of light scattered across the black canvas of the sky. I'd turned off my music, driving in silence except for the hum of the engine and the whisper of tires on asphalt. It was peaceful, meditative even. That's when I saw him. At first, it was just a shape on the side of the road, barely visible in the periphery of my headlights. Could have been a rock, a piece of debris, maybe a coyote. But as I got closer, the shape resolved into something distinctly human. A figure, hunched over, stumbling along the shoulder of the highway. No vehicle in sight. No broken-down car, no motorcycle, nothing. Just a person, alone, in the middle of the desert in December, at least 50 miles from the nearest town. I started to slow down, my foot easing off the accelerator. Every trucker knows the unwritten rules of the road, and one of them is simple. You help people in genuine distress, but you also have to be smart about it. The desert highways have their share of ambush robberies, people pretending to need help only to rob, or worse, when you stop. But this wasn't a young man who might be dangerous. As my headlights fully illuminated him, I could see he was old, maybe 70 or more, wearing what looked like a suit. A black suit, like something you'd wear to a funeral, completely inappropriate for the desert. His hair was white, thin, blowing in the wind, and he was stumbling, barely able to stay upright. I pulled over about 20 yards ahead of him, grabbing my phone and my tire iron just in case. The temperature gauge on my dashboard read 28 degrees Fahrenheit. At his age and those clothes, the old man would be hypothermic soon if he wasn't already. I stepped out of the cab, the cold hitting me immediately despite my heavy jacket. "Sir? Sir, are you all right?" The old man looked up, and even from a distance I could see his lips were blue, his skin pale as paper. He tried to speak, but all that came out was a wheeze. Then his legs gave out, and he collapsed onto the asphalt. I ran to him, all caution forgotten. Up close, he looked even worse. His suit was dusty but expensive, the kind of thing that costs more than I make in a month. His shoes were leather dress shoes, completely worn through at the soles as if he'd been walking for days. But it was his eyes that really got me. Pale blue, almost white, and filled with something I couldn't identify. Fear? Relief? Something else entirely. "We need to get you warm," I said, helping him to his feet. He weighed almost nothing, like his bones were hollow. "Can you walk? My truck's right there." He nodded, leaning heavily on me as we made our way to the cab. I had to practically lift him up into the passenger seat. Once inside, I cranked the heat to maximum and grabbed the emergency blanket from my safety kit, wrapping it around his shoulders. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice dry as desert sand. "Thank you, Leander." I froze. I hadn't told him my name. "How do you know my name?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The old man's eyes focused on me with surprising intensity. "I know many things, Leander Frost. Things about you. Things about your route. Things about what's coming. Who are you?" "My name is Phineas. Phineas Holloway." He coughed, a wet, rattling sound that made me wince. "And I've been walking for 3 days. Looking for you specifically." "That's impossible. How could you know I'd be on this road tonight?" "The same way I know you have a daughter named Jessica who just turned 16. The same way I know you keep her picture taped to your dashboard, right there, next to the photo of your late wife, Margaret, who died in a car accident 7 years ago. The same way I know you still wear your wedding ring, even though you tell people you've moved on." My blood turned to ice. All of that was true, but there was no way this stranger could know any of it. The pictures were there, yes, but too small to see clearly from where he sat. And Margaret's death, Jessica's age, my ring, those weren't things you could guess. "What are you?" I asked, my hand moving unconsciously to the tire iron I'd placed between the seats. "I'm dying," Phineas said simply. "I have maybe an hour, possibly 2. And before I die, I need to tell you something." Something that will save your life and the lives of many others. But first, I need you to drive. North, toward Rachel. There's something there you need to see. I'm not going anywhere until you explain how you know about my family. He closed his eyes, and for a moment I thought he'd passed out. Then he spoke, his voice different, younger somehow. March 15th, 2012. You're at the Sunshine Diner in Bakersfield. You're sitting in the third booth from the door, having coffee and pie, apple pie. The waitress, her name is Gloria, she's telling you about her grandson who wants to be a trucker like you. You give her a $20 tip because she reminds you of your mother. I remembered that day. Every detail he'd just described was accurate. But I'd been alone in that diner. There was no way he could know any of that unless... You were there, I said. You were watching me. Not watching. Experiencing. I see through time, Leander. Past, present, future. They're all the same to me now. It's what happens when you get too close to the truth, when you see behind the veil. The human mind isn't meant to process that kind of information. It breaks you. But before it does, you see everything. You're insane. Probably. But I'm also right. In 13 minutes, your dispatcher, Cordelia Stone, is going to call you. She's going to tell you there's been an accident on Highway 95, that you need to take a detour. Don't listen to her. It's not really her. What do you mean, not really her? They can mimic voices perfectly. Phone calls, radio transmissions, even face-to-face if they've had time to study their target. They've been watching you, Leander, for months. You're important to them, though I haven't been able to see why. I wanted to throw him out of my truck, to drive away and pretend this encounter never happened. But something kept me there. Maybe it was the conviction in his voice, or the impossible things he knew, or just the fact that an old man was dying in my cab and I couldn't bring myself to abandon him. Who are they? I asked. Old things. Older than the desert, older than humanity. They've been sleeping for millennia, but something woke them up. Nuclear tests, maybe, or mining operations, or just the weight of human presence in places that should have been left alone. They're not evil, exactly. They're just incompatible with our reality. When they touch our world, things go wrong. People disappear, or worse, they come back changed. Changed how? You'll see. Drive north, like I said. There's a rest stop about 15 miles from here. Abandoned, officially, but they use it as a gathering point. You need to see what they do there to understand what you're up against. My phone rang. The dashboard clock showed exactly 13 minutes had passed since Phineas's prediction. The caller ID showed Cordelia's number. I answered, putting it on speaker. Leander here. Leander, thank God. It was Cordelia's voice, but now that Phineas had mentioned it, I could hear something off about it. Too perfect, maybe. Like a recording rather than a real person. There's been a major pileup on your route. Multiple fatalities. You need to take the old mining road near mile marker 89. What kind of accident? I asked, watching Phineas's face. Truck jackknifed, hazmat spill. The whole highway's closed. The mining road is your only option if you want to make your delivery on time. Phineas was shaking his head vigorously, mouthing the word no. I'll figure something out, I said. Thanks for the heads up. Leander, you need to take that detour. It's the only safe route. Since when did Cordelia care more about delivery times than driver safety? The real Cordelia would have told me to park it and wait. Deadline be damned. I said I'll figure it out. I repeated, then hung up. Good, Phineas said. You're starting to see. The mining road is a trap. They've been using it for years to funnel drivers into their territory. The accident on 95 is fake, a story to make you deviate from your route. But if you know all this, if you can see the future, why don't you stop them? Why don't you warn everyone? I tried, God, how I tried, but no one believes a crazy old man talking about monsters in the desert. And the more I tried to explain, the less sane I sounded. That's their protection, you see. The truth is so impossible that speaking it makes you seem insane. He started coughing again, harder this time. When he pulled his hand away from his mouth, there was blood on his palm. "We don't have much time," he wheezed. "Drive to the rest stop, see what they're doing. Then you'll understand why you have to stop them." Against every instinct screaming at me to turn around, to get back on my route and forget this ever happened, I put the truck in gear and headed north. The highway stretched ahead, empty and dark, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was driving toward something that would change everything I thought I knew about the world. 15 miles. Phineas had said 15 miles to the rest stop. I watched the odometer tick up, each tenth of a mile feeling like an eternity. Phineas sat quietly beside me, wrapped in the emergency blanket, his breathing becoming more labored with each passing minute. At 14.7 miles I saw it. A faded sign. Rest area, next right. The exit ramp was barely visible, covered in hot and debris. No one had maintained it in years. "Park before the rest area," Phineas instructed. "We'll walk the last part. They have sensors that detect vehicles, but on foot, in the dark, we might go unnoticed." I pulled off the road, tucking the truck behind a cluster of Joshua trees. The moment I turned off the engine, the silence was overwhelming. No insects, no wind, no distant traffic. Just dead, oppressive quiet. "Can you walk?" I asked Phineas. "I'll manage. I have to." He struggled out of the cab, leaning on me for support. "Whatever happens, whatever you see, don't interfere. Just observe. You need to understand what you're fighting before you can fight it." We made our way through the desert, moving slowly to accommodate Phineas's weakness. The rest stop buildings appeared as shadows against the stars, dark and seemingly abandoned. But as we got closer, I could see a light coming from inside. Faint, but definitely there. "Down," Phineas whispered, pulling me behind a concrete barrier. From our hiding spot, we could see into the rest area proper. What I saw there still haunts my dreams. There were vehicles parked in neat rows. Trucks, cars, RVs, all empty, all with their doors open. And moving between them were figures that looked human from a distance but were wrong up close. They moved too smoothly, like they were gliding rather than walking. Their proportions were off. Arms too long, necks that bent at impossible angles. And in the center of the rest area, they'd built something. A structure made of metal and glass and what looked like bones, reaching up toward the sky like an antenna or a beacon. It pulsed with a light that hurt to look at directly, a color that didn't exist in normal space. "What is that thing?" I whispered, unable to look away from the pulsing structure. "A transmitter," Phineas replied, his voice barely audible. "They're sending signals into space, calling more of their kind. Every person they take, every vehicle they capture, adds to its power. Look closer at the base." I didn't want to look closer, but I did. The base of the structure wasn't made of metal and glass like I'd first thought. It was organic, pulsing like a heart, with veins or cables running from it to each of the abandoned vehicles. And now that I was really looking, I could see that the vehicles weren't empty after all. There were shapes inside them, human shapes, but motionless, connected to the structure by those same cable veins. "They're using people as batteries," I said, bile rising in my throat. "Not batteries, processors. Human consciousness has something they need, something they can't generate themselves. Creativity, perhaps, or emotion, or just the spark of true sentience. They're parasites, but instead of feeding on blood or flesh, they feed on thoughts, memories, the essence of what makes us human. One of the wrong-proportioned figures suddenly stopped moving, its head turning in our direction. Even from a distance, I could see its eyes were black, completely black, like holes in reality. "Down," Phineas hissed, pulling me lower behind the barrier. We waited, hearts pounding, as footsteps approached. Not normal footsteps. There was a wet, sliding quality to them, like something trying to remember how walking was supposed to sound. They got closer, closer, then stopped just on the other side of our barrier. I held my breath, gripping a rock I'd found, knowing it would be useless against whatever was on the other side of that concrete. Phineas's hand found mine, squeezing with surprising strength. His lips moved silently, and I realized he was counting down. 3, 2, 1. A phone rang, not mine, but somewhere back at the rest stop. The creature on the other side of our barrier made a sound like static from a broken radio. Then those wet footsteps moved away, back toward the structure. "We need to go," Phineas said. "Now, while they're distracted." We crawled backward, staying low until we were out of sight of the rest area, then struggled to our feet and moved as quickly as Phineas's condition would allow back toward my truck. Behind us, I could hear sounds that might have been voices, but in no language I recognized. Back in the cab, Phineas collapsed against the seat, his breathing ragged and wet. The blood on his lips was darker now, almost black in the dashboard lights. "Drive," he gasped. "Get us away from here." I started the engine and pulled back onto the highway heading south, back the way we'd come. In the mirrors, I could see lights moving at the rest stop, searching patterns that reminded me of police searchlights, but wrong somehow, bending in ways light shouldn't bend. "They know we were there," Phineas said. "They'll be looking for us now, but that's okay. That's part of the plan." "What plan? You're dying. We just saw some kind of alien horror show, and you're talking about plans?" "Not alien. That's the thing everyone gets wrong. They're not from space. They're from here, from Earth, just not our Earth. Parallel dimension, alternate reality, whatever you want to call it. There are places where the barriers between worlds are thin, and Nevada is full of them. The nuclear tests didn't just crack atoms, they cracked reality itself. That's insane. Yes, it is, but it's also true. And you're going to need to understand it if you're going to stop them. Stop them? I'm a trucker, not a soldier or a scientist. I haul medical supplies and electronics. I don't fight interdimensional parasites." "No, but you know these roads better than anyone. You know where the thin places are, even if you don't realize it. Those spots where your radio picks up stations that don't exist, where time seems to skip, where you see things in your mirrors that aren't there. You've been mapping them unconsciously for 22 years. He was right. I did know those spots. Every long-haul driver did. We just didn't talk about them, treated them like sailors' superstitions. Mile marker 45 on Highway 6, where you could sometimes hear music from the 1940s. The stretch of 95 near Goldfield, where drivers reported losing hours of time. The junction of 375 and 93, where compasses spun wildly and GPS units showed locations that didn't exist. "There's a pattern," Phineas continued, pulling out a folded piece of paper from his suit pocket. His hands shook as he unfolded it, revealing a map of Nevada covered in red marks and connecting lines. "These are all the spots where people have disappeared in the last 5 years. Look at the pattern." The marks formed a rough circle, with lines connecting them like spokes on a wheel. "And at the center, Rachel," I said. The town of Rachel is at the center. Not the town. What's near the town? Area 51 isn't about aliens, Leander. It never was. It's about keeping people away from the biggest thin spot in North America. The military has been trying to contain it since the 1950s, but they're losing. The barriers are breaking down, and things are coming through. And these things at the rest stop? Scouts, preparing the way for something bigger. That transmitter isn't calling their kind from space. It's weakening the barriers, making it easier for more of them to cross over. And every person they take, every consciousness they harvest, makes the signal stronger. My phone rang again. Cordelia's number, but I didn't answer. "Good," Phineas said. "Don't answer any calls for the next few hours. They can track you through the cell towers, but only if you're actively connected. The real Cordelia will worry. The real Cordelia is—" Phineas paused, his eyes unfocusing for a moment. "She's at home, asleep. She doesn't know her phone is being used. They're very good at borrowing identities without the original knowing. How do you know all this? How can you see all these things?" Phineas was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the dark desert rushing past. When he spoke, his voice was different, sadder. "I was a physicist at Los Alamos, recruited in 1981 for a project so classified it didn't officially exist. We were studying anomalies in space-time, places where the laws of physics seemed to break down. The military told us it was about developing new weapons, but that was a lie. They'd found something in the desert, something that shouldn't exist, and they wanted us to figure out what it was." He coughed again, more blood speckling his lips. "We built a machine, a viewer, we called it. It could peer into parallel dimensions, see other versions of reality. The first tests were incredible. We saw Earths where dinosaurs never went extinct, where humanity never evolved, where the laws of physics were completely different. But then we found them, the crawling chaos, we called them. Beings that existed between dimensions, feeding on the boundaries between worlds. And they saw you looking. Worse. We made contact. One of my colleagues, Dr. Elizabeth Thorne, she thought we could communicate with them. She was brilliant, spoke 17 languages, had degrees in linguistics and mathematics. She volunteered to be the first to attempt direct mental contact using the viewer." Phineas closed his eyes, lost in the memory. "The moment she made contact, she started screaming. Not with her voice, but with her mind. We all felt it, like nails on a chalkboard inside our skulls. When we finally shut down the machine, she was catatonic. 3 days later, she woke up. But she wasn't Elizabeth anymore. She was them, wearing her body like a suit. What happened to her? The military tried to contain her, but she walked through the walls of her cell like they weren't there. Killed 7 soldiers with a touch, aging them decades in seconds. Then she disappeared into the desert. That was 38 years ago. I've been tracking her ever since, trying to undo what we did." "And your ability to see through time? A side effect of exposure to the viewer. It's killing me, has been for years. The human brain isn't meant to perceive time as a single entity, but it's also allowed me to track them, to predict their movements, to try to warn people like you. Why me specifically? Because in 3 days, they're going to open a permanent gateway. The transmitter at the rest stop is just one of 12 they've built across Nevada. When they activate them all simultaneously, the barrier between worlds will collapse completely, and you're the only one in position to stop them. How could I possibly stop something like that? The same way you stop any machine. You break a critical component. The transmitters are connected, networked. Destroy the primary node and the whole system fails. But the primary node is mobile, hidden in a truck that looks exactly like any other truck on these highways. They move it constantly to avoid detection. So find one specific truck among thousands. Not find. You already know where it is. You've passed it dozens of times without realizing what it was. That feeling you get sometimes, like you're being watched? That cold sensation that runs down your spine for no reason? That's your subconscious recognizing the wrongness of it. He pulled out another piece of paper, this one with a list of dates and locations. These are all the times you've reported equipment malfunctions in the last year. Strange readings on your instruments, radio interference, that sort of thing. Plot them on a map, and you'll see they all happened at specific locations. I looked at the list. He was right. I did remember these incidents. Times when my compass went crazy, when my CB picked up impossible transmissions, when my engine ran rough for no mechanical reason. Now, Phineas continued, cross-reference those locations with reports from other drivers. The pattern becomes clear. The mobile node follows specific routes, stopping at specific points to synchronize with the fixed transmitters. And in 3 days, it will be at the junction of Highway 95 and 373 at exactly 3:17 a.m. How can you be so specific? Because I've seen it happen. Multiple times, in multiple timelines. Sometimes you stop them, sometimes you don't. The timeline we're in now is balanced on a knife's edge. Your decision in the next few hours determines which way it falls. No pressure, I muttered. All the pressure in the world, Phineas corrected. But you're not alone. There are others who know the truth who've been preparing. Truckers mostly, but also highway patrol officers, mechanics, people who work the night shifts and see things that don't make it into official reports. They're waiting for a signal, someone to coordinate them. And you think I'm that someone? I know you are. In every timeline where humanity survives this, you're the one who brings people together. Your reputation on these roads, the respect other drivers have for you, the connections you've built over 22 years, that's your real weapon. He handed me a third piece of paper, this one with CB radio frequencies and code words. Start making contact. Tell them the stranger was right. They'll know what it means. They've been waiting for this message for years, some of them. They'll come when you call. This is crazy. You're asking me to believe that I'm supposed to lead some kind of trucker rebellion against interdimensional parasites. Not led. Unite. The leadership will come from others, people with military experience, scientific knowledge. But they need someone they trust to bring them together. And that's you. The dashboard clock showed 3:00 a.m. We'd been driving for an hour, putting distance between us and the rest stop. But I could feel something following us, a pressure in the air like a storm building. They're coming, Phineas said, confirming my fear. We've got maybe 10 minutes before they catch up. What do we do? You drop me off at the next mile marker. I'll delay them, give you time to escape. You can barely stand. What are you going to do against those things? Die, he said simply. But I'll die loud, die bright. I've got one last trick, something I've been saving. It won't stop them, but it'll hurt them. Make them cautious. Buy you the time you need to start organizing the resistance. I'm not leaving you to die. I'm already dead, Leander. Have been for years, just too stubborn to admit it. This is how I'm supposed to go, how I've seen it happen in every timeline where we win. My death is the catalyst that starts the chain reaction. That's not right. There has to be another way. There are infinite ways, but this is the best one. The one where the most people survive. He reached into his suit pocket one more time, pulling out a small device that looked like a modified cell phone. Take this. When you're ready to coordinate the attack on the mobile node, press the red button. It'll send a signal that our people will recognize, even if the enemy is monitoring communications. I took the device, its weight heavier than its size suggested. Mile marker 289, Phineas said. Drop me off there. Don't look back. Don't slow down. Just keep driving. Get to a truck stop, start making those calls. You have 71 hours to build an army. Phineas? My real name is actually Dr. Marcus Holloway. I used Phineas because I knew you'd remember it. The unusual name sticking in your memory. Everything I've done, every word I've said, has been calculated to maximize our chances of success. Even this confession, right now, is part of it. You needed to know you were being manipulated so you could choose to trust me anyway. That's honestly kind of messed up. Yes, it is, but it's also necessary. The things we're fighting don't think like us, don't have our moral constraints. To beat them, we have to be willing to do things that feel wrong. He pointed ahead. Mile marker 289, pull over. I pulled over at mile marker 289, my hands trembling on the wheel. The desert stretched out on both sides of the highway, empty and desolate under the starlight. Behind us, I could see faint lights in the distance, moving too fast to be normal vehicles. They're about 8 minutes out, Phineas, Dr. Holloway, said, checking his watch. Remember everything I told you. The frequencies, the code words, the location of the mobile node. Don't try to be a hero. Just coordinate, survive, and strike when the time is right. He opened the door and practically fell out of the cab, catching himself on the side of the truck. I jumped out to help him, but he waved me off. No, get back in and drive, now. What are you going to do? He pulled something from inside his suit jacket, a metal cylinder about the size of a flashlight, covered in symbols that hurt to look at directly. This is a piece of the original viewer, the machine we built at Los Alamos. I've been carrying it for 38 years, keeping it dormant. When I activate it, it'll create a localized dimensional rupture. Not big enough to let anything through, but enough to cause them serious pain. They'll have to stop, regroup, figure out what happened. That gives you at least an hour head start. That'll kill you. I'm already dying, Leander. At least this way my death means something. He smiled, and for the first time since I'd picked him up, he looked at peace. Tell my daughter I tried. Her name is Rebecca Holloway. She lives in Carson City. She thinks I abandoned the family for my work, and she's not wrong. But tell her I never stopped loving her, and that everything I did was to try to keep her world safe. I'll tell her. Good, now go. Don't look back. I got back in the truck, started the engine, and pulled away. In the mirror, I could see him standing in the middle of the highway, that metal cylinder raised above his head. The lights behind him were getting closer. Close enough now that I could see they weren't headlights at all, but something else. Something that pulsed and writhed. I was 2 miles down the road when the sky behind me turned white. It wasn't an explosion, exactly. It was like reality hiccuped, a flash of impossible light that cast shadows that fell up instead of down. The truck's engine died instantly, all electronics going dead. I coasted to a stop, my ears ringing with a sound that wasn't quite sound, more like the echo of a sound from a dream. Then, as suddenly as it had happened, it was over. The engine coughed back to life, the dashboard lights flickering on. In the mirror, I could see a column of what looked like aurora borealis rising from where I'd left Holloway. Greens and purples that shouldn't exist in the Nevada desert. I drove for the next hour in shock, my mind trying to process everything that had happened. An old man who could see through time had died to save me from interdimensional parasites that were using human consciousness to break down the barriers between worlds. And now I was supposed to organize a resistance using CB radio and trucker connections. It was insane. All of it. But the device in my pocket was real. The list of frequencies was real. And when I finally stopped at a truck stop near Beatty, The fear in my gut was definitely real. The truck stop was one of the big chain ones, brightly lit and busy even at 4 in the morning. I parked between two other rigs and sat for a moment, gathering my courage. Then I grabbed my CB radio and dialed in the first frequency on Holloway's list. "Breaker, breaker," I said, using the code phrase he'd given me. "This is Frost Walker looking for night owls. The stranger was right. I repeat, the stranger was right." Static for a moment, then a voice, female, cautious. "Frost Walker, this is Desert Rose. Confirm secondary. What did the stranger say about the junction?" I checked the paper. There was a response code for this. The stranger said the junction sings at midnight when the moon is dark. A pause, then multiple voices started coming through, overlapping. Holy shit, it's happening. About damn time. "Desert Rose, can you confirm that's really Frost? I know his voice, it's him." The female voice, Desert Rose, took control. "All night owls. Switch to secure channel. Frost Walker, welcome to the frequency. We've been waiting for you." I switched to the indicated channel, and suddenly I was in the middle of a conversation that had apparently been going on for years. 17 confirmed sightings this week alone. Lost another driver near Tonopah. The things at the rest stops are getting bolder. "All right, everyone, quiet down," Desert Rose said. "Frost Walker, I'm Angela Riverstone. I run the independent station out of Goldfield. The stranger, Dr. Holloway, told us someone would come with his message eventually." "Is he?" "He's gone," I said. "Bought me time to escape. Gave me information about something big happening in 3 days." "The convergence," another voice said. Male, older, gravelly. "We know about it. Been tracking the transmitter construction for months. Problem is, we didn't know where the mobile node would be." "Junction of 95 and 373, I said. "December 21st, 3:17 a.m. Silence on the channel. Then Angela spoke. "You're sure?" "That's what Holloway said. He seemed pretty certain." "Then we've got 70 hours to get ready. Frost Walker, Leander, we need you to come to Goldfield. We've been preparing, but we need someone with your reputation to bring in the fence sitters. There are a lot of drivers who know something's wrong, but aren't ready to believe how wrong. I've got a load to deliver." "Screw the load," the gravelly voice said. "This is bigger than any delivery. The company will understand when this is over, if we're all still here to explain." I thought about Jessica, my daughter. Her 16th birthday was next week. If Holloway was right, if these things succeeded in opening their gateway, would there even be a next week? "All right," I said. "I'm coming to Goldfield. But first, I need to make some calls. Real phone calls, not CB. There are people who need to be warned." "Make them fast," Angela said. "Every communication is a risk. They monitor everything." I went into the truck stop, found a payphone, one of the last ones still working in Nevada, and called Jessica first. It was 4:30 a.m., but I needed to hear her voice. "Dad?" She sounded sleepy, confused. "Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine, sweetheart. I just wanted to tell you I love you." "Dad, you're scaring me. What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. I might be out of communication for a few days. Work stuff. But I'll be home for your birthday, I promise." "You better be. You promised to teach me to drive the truck, remember?" "I remember. Jessica, if anything happens, if you hear anything strange on the news about Nevada, I want you to go to your Aunt Linda's in Oregon. Can you promise me that?" "Dad, seriously, what's going on? Just promise me." "Okay, I promise, Dad. I love you." "I love you too, baby. More than all the stars in the sky." It was an old saying between us, from when she was little and afraid of the dark. I'd tell her I loved her more than all the stars, and she'd know everything would be okay. I hung up and made one more call, this one to the real Cordelia Stone's home number. She answered on the third ring, sounding much more awake than Jessica had. "Leander, my phone's been acting strange. I've been getting reports that I've been calling drivers, but I haven't made any calls. Cordelia, listen carefully. Don't go to work for the next 3 days. Call in sick, family emergency, whatever. Just don't go to the dispatch center." "What? Why? Leander, what's happening?" "I can't explain right now. Just trust me. Something big is happening and the dispatch center isn't safe. Can you warn the other dispatchers, the ones you trust?" "Leander, you're scaring me." "Good. Being scared might keep you alive. 3 days, Cordelia. After that, things should be clearer." I hung up before she could ask more questions. Every second I stayed on the line was a risk. Back in my truck, I pulled out of the truck stop and headed for Goldfield. It was a 2-hour drive, and I spent it listening to the CB chatter. More drivers were checking in, using code names and cautious language. Desert Rose, who I now knew was Angela Riverstone, was coordinating everything with military precision. By the time I reached Goldfield, the sun was coming up, painting the desert in shades of gold and red. The independent station Angela ran was on the outskirts of town, a collection of fuel pumps, a small diner, and a repair shop that looked like it had been there since the 1950s. But appearances were deceiving. As I pulled in, I could see defensive positions had been set up, hidden but there if you knew what to look for. The windows of the diner had been reinforced. There were vehicles parked strategically to provide cover if needed. Angela met me as I climbed out of my truck. She was younger than her voice had suggested, maybe 40, with sharp eyes and calloused hands that spoke of real work. Her flannel shirt had a small pin on the collar, a truck wheel with wings, the old symbol of the Independent Truckers Association. "Leander Frost," she said, extending her hand. "I've heard about you for years. You're the one who exposed that trafficking ring 5 years back. That was just luck and stubbornness. No, it was noticing patterns and giving a damn. Same skills we need now." She gestured toward the diner. "Come on, there are people you need to meet." Inside, the diner had been transformed into a command center. Maps covered the walls, marked with red pins and string connecting various points. Radio equipment was set up on several tables, and there were people, truckers mostly, but also a few I recognized as mechanics, gas station owners, even a couple of highway patrol officers in civilian clothes. "Everyone, this is Leander Frost," Angela announced. The stranger chose him to coordinate the assault on the mobile node. A man stepped forward, older, military bearing despite his trucker's clothes. "Tom Bridgewater," he said. "Former Army Rangers, now I haul produce. You sure about the location Holloway gave you?" He seemed certain, said he'd seen it happen in multiple timelines. "Multiple timelines," Tom shook his head. "A year ago, I'd have called that crazy talk. Now, after what I've seen, I believe it." "What have you seen?" I asked. "Show him the photos," Angela said. Tom pulled out a folder, spreading photographs across the nearest table. They were grainy, taken from a distance, but clear enough. The things from the rest stop. The ones with wrong proportions. Vehicles covered in those organic cables. And in one photo, something that made my blood run cold. A truck that looked normal except for the shadows it cast. Multiple shadows, falling in different directions, as if it existed in several dimensions at once. "That's the mobile node," Tom said. "We've been tracking it for months. Never stays in one place long, never takes the same route twice. But if Holloway's right about the convergence point, we can intercept it," Angela finished. "But it won't be easy. These things, they're not just physically dangerous. They get in your head. make you see things that aren't there or not see things that are. We've lost good people who just walked off into the desert, following something only they could see. How do we fight something like that? Numbers, said a new voice. A woman in her 60s wearing a mechanic's coveralls. I'm Diane Winters. I run the shop here. The things can mess with a few minds at once, but get enough people, and they can't control everyone. That's why we need every driver we can get. How many do we have? Right now, about 40 confirmed. But if you put out the call, use your reputation, we could have hundreds. Maybe enough to make a difference. I looked around the room at these people who'd been fighting a secret war while the rest of the world went on oblivious. They looked tired, scared, but determined. All right, I said. Let's start making calls. We've got 68 hours to build an army. The next 2 days were a blur of activity. I spent hours on the CB and the phone, reaching out to every contact I'd made in 22 years of driving. Some thought I was crazy, others hung up immediately, but more than I expected said yes. They'd seen things too, felt the wrongness growing in the desert, and were relieved to finally have someone to tell them they weren't going insane. Truckers started arriving in Goldfield, parking their rigs in a makeshift staging area Angela had set up in an abandoned lot. By the morning of December 20th, we had over 200 drivers, plus support personnel, mechanics, medics, even a few ex-military who'd heard about what we were doing through back channels. Tom Bridgewater took charge of tactical planning, using his ranger experience to organize us into teams. Angela handled logistics, making sure everyone had supplies, fuel, and working radios. And I became the voice of the operation, the one who explained to newcomers what we were up against and why we had to fight. These things, I told a group of newly arrived drivers, they're not invincible. Dr. Holloway proved that when he died. They can be hurt, they can be stopped, but only if we work together, only if we trust each other. One of the drivers, a young guy named Pete, raised his hand. What happens if we fail? If we can't stop them from opening this gateway? I thought about lying, about giving him false hope. But these people deserved the truth. If we fail, the barriers between dimensions collapse. These things pour through by the thousands, maybe millions. They'll take every human they can find, use our consciousness to spread to other dimensions. Earth becomes a hub for their invasion of reality itself. Jesus, Pete muttered. Yeah, so we don't fail. That night, December 20th, I couldn't sleep. I stood outside the diner looking up at the stars, thinking about Holloway's sacrifice. A hand touched my shoulder, and I turned to find Angela standing beside me. You did good, she said, bringing all these people together. Holloway was right to choose you. I'm just a trucker. No, you're a leader. You just didn't know it until now. She pulled out a flask, took a sip, and offered it to me. Whiskey, cheap but warming. You know what the hardest part of this is? What? Knowing that win or lose, the world will never know what we did. If we succeed, the government will cover it up, claim it was a military exercise or something. If we fail, there won't be anyone left to remember. Then, why do it? She smiled, but it was sad. Because it's the right thing to do. Because those are our roads out there, our people being taken. And because if we don't, who will? The convoy of trucks moved through the Nevada desert like a steel river. 217 rigs in total, running with minimal lights to avoid detection. I was in the lead vehicle with Tom Bridgewater and Angela Riverstone, following the route we'd carefully planned over the last 48 hours. Behind us, spread out over 5 miles of highway, was the most unlikely army ever assembled. Truckers, mechanics, gas station owners, all united by the shared knowledge that something terrible was happening in their desert, on their roads. The cab of my truck felt smaller than usual, packed with equipment we'd hastily assembled. Modified CB radios that could broadcast on frequencies that shouldn't exist. Electromagnetic pulse devices jury-rigged from microwave parts and car batteries. And in my pocket, the weight of Holloway's device, warm against my chest like it had its own heartbeat. 30 minutes to the junction, Tom said, checking his GPS. The screen flickered, showing our location, then somewhere in Montana, then back to Nevada. The closer we got to the junction, the less reliable our instruments became. Teams are in position, Angela confirmed on the radio, her voice crackling through static that sounded almost like whispers. Team Alpha is approaching from the north, Beta from the east, Gamma's hanging back as reserve. Everyone's maintaining radio silence except for emergencies. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, feeling the familiar vibration of the engine through my hands. 22 years I'd been driving these roads, and my truck had become an extension of myself. Tonight, I was asking her to go into battle, and somehow I felt like she understood. There, Tom pointed ahead. Heat signatures on thermal. 3 vehicles at the junction, just like Holloway predicted. Through the thermal scope Tom was using, I could see them clearly despite the darkness. 3 trucks arranged in a triangle formation at the intersection of Highways 95 and 373. One of them had to be the mobile node, but which one? They all looked identical through the scope, just heat blobs against the cold desert. Wait, Angela said, studying her equipment. I'm picking up electromagnetic readings. The middle truck, it's generating a field unlike anything I've ever seen. The numbers don't make sense. It's reading as being in multiple locations simultaneously. That's when things started to go wrong. My radio, which had been silent on the emergency channel, suddenly burst to life with screaming. Not one voice, but dozens, all crying out at once. I recognized some of them. Drivers from our convoy, people I'd spoken to just hours before. People I'd convinced to join this insane mission. "It's a trap!" someone shouted before their voice cut off mid-scream. "They're inside the trucks. They're already inside." The lights of the junction suddenly blazed to life, impossibly bright, turning night into day. But it wasn't normal light. It bent wrong, casting shadows that fell upward, creating patches of darkness where there should have been illumination. And in that harsh, impossible illumination, I saw them. Not 3 trucks, but dozens. They'd been hidden somehow, cloaked in that dimensional distortion Holloway had talked about. Standing between the vehicles were the creatures, hundreds of them, their wrong-proportioned bodies casting multiple shadows in all directions. Some still wore the remnants of human clothing, trucker caps, work boots, wedding rings fused into fingers that had too many joints. These had been people once, people like us. "Abort!" Tom shouted into the radio. "All teams abort! It's an ambush!" But it was too late. The trap was already sprung. The highway beneath us began to crack and buckle. Not from physical force, but from something else. Something that made the asphalt ripple like water. The yellow lines that marked the lanes started moving, writhing like snakes, forming symbols that hurt to look at. Several trucks in our convoy jackknifed, sliding off the road as reality itself seemed to bend around them. "Hold steady!" I shouted into the radio, fighting to keep my own truck under control. The steering wheel was fighting me, trying to turn on its own, drawn toward the cluster of vehicles at the junction like iron to a magnet. "Don't stop! Push through!" Angela was frantically working her equipment, sparks flying from overloaded circuits. "The mobile node is generating some kind of field. It's destabilizing local space-time. If it completes its connection with the other transmitters..." She didn't need to finish. We all knew what would happen. The barrier between dimensions would collapse completely. I made a decision that went against every instinct I had as a driver, every hour of training, every mile of experience. I yanked the wheel hard left, taking my truck off-road, heading straight for the cluster of vehicles at the junction. The desert floor was rough, full of rocks and sudden drops, but I didn't slow down. Behind me, I heard Tom shouting, but I couldn't make out the words over the roar of the engine and the impossible sounds coming from outside. Reality tearing like fabric, the screams of men being transformed, the static whisper voices of the creatures. The speedometer climbed past safe limits. 60, 70, 80 miles per hour over terrain that should have destroyed my suspension. But the truck held together, whether through luck or something else. Maybe she knew this was our only shot. The creatures moved to intercept, flowing across the desert with that horrible liquid grace. One of them leaped onto my hood, its face pressing against the windshield. This close, I could see it had once been human. There were still traces of the person it used to be in its features, twisted and stretched but recognizable. It was wearing the remnants of a trucker's uniform. A name tag still clung to the fabric. Raymond Hutchins. I'd known Ray. We'd shared coffee at a truck stop in Tonopah 6 months ago. He'd shown me pictures of his grandkids, talked about retiring next year, buying an RV, seeing the country at his own pace instead of on deadline. Now, his face was elongated like putty, pulled in different directions. His eyes black pits that reflected nothing. His mouth open in a silent scream that would never end. I slammed on the brakes, sending the creature, sending Ray, flying into the darkness, then accelerated again. The mobile node was just ahead, a Peterbilt that looked perfectly normal except for the way light bent around it, creating halos and distortions that hurt to look at directly. The air around it shimmered like heat waves, but it was December in the desert, below freezing. "Leander, what are you doing?" Angela's voice in my ear, high with panic. "Getting close enough to use Holloway's device. Cover me." Behind me, our convoy had erupted into chaos. Some truckers were ramming the creatures with their rigs, using their vehicles as 40-ton battering rams. Others had pulled over and were fighting with whatever weapons they'd brought. Tire irons, flare guns, the modified tasers Tom had distributed. I saw Nancy Thornton, whose partner Bill had been transformed at the beginning of the battle, standing on top of her truck with a flamethrower, screaming as she burned anything that got close. The flames were different colors, blue, green, purple, as they consumed creatures that weren't entirely in our dimension. Tom had organized a defensive line, using the trucks as mobile barriers while those with military experience laid down covering fire. But conventional weapons weren't doing much. Bullets passed through some creatures, stuck in others like they were made of tar. The tasers worked better, disrupting whatever field allowed them to exist in our dimension. But there were so many of them. And worse, some of our own people were changing. I watched it happen to a driver I'd known for years, Bill Rademacher. One moment he was swinging a crowbar at a creature, the next he was on his knees, his body convulsing as his proportions began to shift and stretch. His partner, Nancy Thornton, ran to him, trying to pull him back to their truck. "Bill! Billy, fight it! Stay with me!" But Bill's arms had already grown too long, his fingers splitting into too many joints. When he looked up at Nancy, his eyes had turned black, reflecting nothing. He reached for her with those impossible hands, and Nancy had to make the hardest choice of her life. She shot him with the taser, tears streaming down her face, then dragged his convulsing form back toward their truck. I reached the mobile node and slammed my truck into it broadside. The impact should have destroyed both vehicles, should have been a crash that no one walked away from. But instead, it felt like hitting water. My truck passed partially through the other vehicle, and for a moment I existed in two places at once. I could see the inside of the mobile node, and it was impossible. The cab was bigger on the inside, stretching back into corridors and rooms that couldn't exist in a space that size. The geometry was wrong, with stairs that went up and down simultaneously, doors that opened onto themselves, walls that were floors from a different angle. It was like being inside an M.C. Escher drawing, if Escher had been having nightmares. And at the center, connected to the truck by those organic cables, were human figures. Dozens of them, all suspended in the air like marionettes, their eyes open but unseeing, their mouths moving in perfect synchronization. They were speaking, chanting something in a language that predated human speech, that maybe predated Earth itself. At the very center was Dr. Elizabeth Thorne, the colleague Holloway had mentioned, the one who'd made first contact with the creatures 38 years ago. She was still alive, if you could call it that. Her body was suspended in the organic web, but unlike the others, her eyes were aware. She saw me, recognized me somehow, even though we'd never met, and I could see the torment in them, the decades of being used as a living processor for this abomination. Her lips moved, fighting against whatever force was controlling the others. She was trying to tell me something. I pulled out Holloway's device and pressed the red button. The effect was immediate and violent. A pulse of energy erupted from the device, visible as a sphere of distorted air that expanded outward. When it hit the mobile node, the truck began to scream. Not a mechanical sound, but an organic one, like a living thing in agony. The dimensional distortions around it intensified, reality fracturing like a broken mirror. I saw myself reflected 1,000 times, each reflection slightly different. Versions of me that had made different choices, lived different lives, died different deaths. Dr. Thorne's eyes suddenly focused on me with desperate intensity. Her mouth formed words, fighting against whatever force was controlling the others. The core. Destroy the core. Bottom level. Structural support. Hurry. They're coming from inside. I grabbed the fire axe from my truck's emergency kit. Every trucker carries one, hoping never to use it. Mine had been with me for 15 years, the handle worn smooth from my grip during nervous moments. I'd held it during storms, during close calls, during long nights when the shadows seemed too dark and the radio picked up voices that shouldn't exist. I climbed deeper into the impossible interior of the mobile node, the axe heavy in my hands. The creatures outside were converging on my position, but some of our drivers had formed a protective circle, ramming any creature that got too close. I could hear engines revving, metal crushing against metal, the shouts of truckers who'd decided that if they were going down, they were going down fighting. "For the road!" someone shouted, and others took up the cry. "For the road! For the road!" It became our battle cry, simple and perfect. We weren't fighting for abstract concepts like humanity or dimension. We were fighting for the road, our road, the highways we'd driven for decades. The interior of the mobile node fought against me. Corridors stretched when I tried to move through them, becoming miles long. Doors led back to themselves. Gravity changed directions, and I found myself walking on walls, on ceilings, on surfaces that weren't quite either. The organic walls pulsed around me, warm and wet, like being inside something alive. Faces pushed out from the walls. Human faces, trapped in the organic material, their mouths open in silent screams. I recognized some of them. Drivers who'd gone missing over the years, absorbed into this thing, their consciousness feeding it. There was Patricia Goldberg, who'd vanished near Ely 2 years ago. Her husband had spent everything he had searching for her, hired private investigators, offered rewards. He'd died 6 months ago, never knowing what happened to her. Now I knew. She was here, part of the wall, aware but unable to move, unable to die. There was young Kevin Oates, fresh out of truck driving school, disappeared on his third solo run. His mother still called the trucking company every week, hoping for news. There were dozens of others, maybe hundreds, all merged with the organic structure, all feeding the mobile node with their consciousness. "I'm sorry," I whispered to them. "I'm so sorry." At what felt like the bottom level, though direction had lost meaning in this place, I found the core. It was beautiful and terrible. A sphere of crystallized reality about the size of a basketball, floating in the center of a chamber that defied physical laws. The walls here weren't walls, but suggestions of walls. Boundaries that existed only because someone had decided they should. And inside the sphere, I could see everything. Not just images from our world, but from thousands of others. I saw Earths where humanity never evolved, where dinosaurs developed technology, where the ocean covered everything. I saw Earths where the creatures had already won and humanity was extinct, our cities' empty ruins being reclaimed by things that had never been alive in the conventional sense. I saw Earths where the war between dimensions had been going on for millennia, where reality itself was scarred and broken from constant battle. And I saw one Earth, so similar to ours it could have been ours, where an old trucker was standing in this same spot with the same axe, making the same choice. But in that world, he hesitated a second too long. I didn't hesitate. The organic cables connecting Dr. Thorne and the others all led here, feeding the core with human consciousness, using our creativity and adaptability to power their invasion. The cables pulsed with stolen life, with thoughts and dreams and memories that would never be returned. I raised the axe. "Wait," a voice behind me. Not threatening, almost pleading. I turned to see one of the creatures, but this one was different. It still had mostly human features, though stretched and distorted. It was wearing the remains of a military uniform. Desert Storm patches still visible on the twisted fabric. "You don't know what you're doing," it said, its voice layered with harmonics that made my teeth ache. "That core is the only thing keeping the dimensions separate in this area. Destroy it, and you'll create a permanent rift. Both our worlds will bleed into each other. Millions will die." "You're lying." "Am I? Ask yourself why Holloway really sent you here. He could see the future, couldn't he? He knew what would happen. He wanted this. He wanted the rift." For a moment I hesitated. What if the creature was right? What if Holloway had been playing a longer game than any of us realized? Then I heard it, screaming from above. Human screaming. Our people were dying while I stood here debating, and through the walls somehow I could hear Dr. Thorne's voice, weak but determined. "Do it. End this, please. Even death is better than this, please." "Holloway was trying to save us," I said to the creature, and even if he wasn't, even if this causes problems, at least they'll be our problems, human problems, not yours. You're making a mistake. Maybe, but it's my mistake to make. I swung the axe. The first blow cracked the sphere. Light poured out. Not regular light, but something that contained colors that didn't exist in our spectrum. Colors that had names and languages that would never be spoken. The creature lunged at me, but the second blow shattered the core completely. The explosion wasn't physical. It was existential. For a moment that lasted forever, and no time at all, I existed in all dimensions simultaneously. I saw every possible version of myself. Versions that had died as children. Versions that had never become truckers. Versions that had joined the creatures willingly. Versions that had saved the world. Versions that had ended it. I saw my daughter Jessica in 1,000 different futures. Sometimes surviving, sometimes not. Sometimes becoming something beyond human. Sometimes remaining beautifully, perfectly ordinary. I saw my wife Margaret, not dead, but transformed. existing in a dimension where death was just another state of being, where she waited for me with patience that transcended time. I saw Holloway, not dead, but displaced, scattered across time like light through a prism, still fighting, still planning, still sending messages through the quantum foam. I saw the creature's dimension and understood their desperation. Their reality was dying, had been dying for eons, consumed by entropy that moved faster there than here. They weren't invaders. They were refugees trying to escape a cosmic death sentence. And I saw something else, something coming from beyond both our dimensions, something that made the creatures seem like children afraid of the dark. The real threat, the thing Dr. Thorne had tried to warn about. Then reality snapped back like a rubber band, and I was flying through the air, expelled from the mobile node as it collapsed in on itself. The impossible geometry folded and refolded, dimensions colliding and separating, until finally, with a sound like the universe clearing its throat, the whole thing imploded. I hit the desert floor hard, sand filling my mouth, my ears ringing with the sound of dimensions tearing and reforming. My body felt wrong, like I'd been taken apart and put back together by someone who'd only seen a rough sketch of how humans were supposed to work. But I was alive. Where the mobile node had been, there was now a crater, perfectly circular. Its edges fused to glass that reflected too many colors. The air above it shimmered with residual energy, reality still trying to figure out what had just happened. But the creature had been wrong. There was no permanent rift. The explosion had cauterized reality, sealing the dimensional weak point permanently. The creatures couldn't use this junction anymore. Dr. Thorne and the other captives were free, their bodies scattered around the crater. Most were dead, their consciousness having been drained over years or decades, but Dr. Thorne was still breathing, barely. I crawled to her, my body protesting every movement. I cradled her head in my lap, and she looked up at me with eyes that had seen too much. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice paper-thin. She was aging rapidly, her body catching up to the 38 years it had been frozen in dimensional stasis. Her hair went from brown to gray to white in moments. "Tell Marcus, tell him he was right. The viewing machine. It wasn't our mistake. It was our salvation. We gave humanity the knowledge to fight back. Dr. Holloway is dead," I told her gently, though, after what I'd seen in the explosion, I wasn't sure that was entirely true. She smiled, and for a moment her eyes were young again. "No, he's just displaced. Time isn't what we think it is. Linear progression is an illusion our minds create to make sense of chaos. He's still out there, still fighting, just elsewhere. Else when." Her hand gripped mine with surprising strength. "The children in Rachel. The town the creatures took, they're still alive, stored in a dimensional pocket. The coordinates are..." She whispered a series of numbers that burned themselves into my memory. Numbers that shouldn't have meant anything but somehow described a location outside normal space. "Save them, promise me." "I promise." "And Leander. What you saw when the core shattered. The thing that's coming. I saw it. Then you know. The creatures aren't our enemy. They're just the first wave of refugees. Something is consuming realities, moving through dimensions like a forest fire. We need to prepare. We need to unite. Human, creature, whatever else is out there. Because alone, we all fall." She died with a smile on her face, finally free after 38 years of torment. Around me, the battle was ending. Without the mobile node to anchor them, the creatures were retreating. The dimensional rifts were closing one by one, cutting off their reinforcements. Those trapped on our side collapsed, their bodies unable to maintain cohesion without the support of their home dimension. They dissolved like sugar in rain, leaving only wet spots on the desert floor that steamed in the cold night air. But our victory had come at a cost. Of the 217 truckers who'd joined the convoy, 43 were dead. Another 60 were injured, some critically, and 15 had been partially transformed, caught between human and creature, their bodies twisted into impossible shapes that medical science had no frame of reference for. Tom Bridgewater found me sitting beside Dr. Thorne's body, still trying to process what I'd seen in those moments of dimensional overlap. "Is it over?" he asked, his face streaked with blood and oil, and something that might have been tears. "This battle is," I said. "But the war? No. There's something else coming, something worse. Then we'd better get ready for round 2. Angela's voice crackled over the radio. "Government forces incoming. ETA 5 minutes. All units, scatter. Repeat, scatter. Meet at the backup location." We loaded our wounded and our dead into the surviving trucks. I carried Dr. Thorne's body myself, refusing to leave her for the government to dissect and classify. She deserved better than that. They all did. As we drove away from the junction, I looked back to see military helicopters converging on the crater, their searchlights sweeping across the battlefield. They'd clean it up, cover it up, pretend it never happened. But we knew the truth. Over 200 truckers knew the truth, and more importantly, we knew it wasn't over. The story should have ended there. Victory against impossible odds, the mobile node destroyed, the dimensional invasion stopped. But stories don't really end. They just pause between chapters. 3 days after the battle, I stood at the memorial we'd built at Angela's station in Goldfield. We'd constructed it from truck parts, wheels, chrome bumpers, CB antennas, arranged in a pattern that somehow seemed right. Each piece represented someone we'd lost. 43 pieces. 43 friends who'd trusted me when I said we could win. The government had tried to shut us down, of course. They'd sent agents to intimidate us, offered us money to stay quiet, threatened us with prosecution under laws that probably didn't actually exist. But what could they do, really? Arrest 200 truckers? The supply chain would collapse. The country would grind to a halt. So they reached a compromise. We'd keep quiet about the specifics, not go to the media, not post videos online. In exchange, they'd leave us alone to monitor the dimensional weak points, and they'd provide resources, weapons, equipment, medical support for future incidents. Future incidents. Angela had laughed bitterly when they'd said that. Like it's just another hazard of the job, like dimensional invasions are going to be listed next to road conditions on our route reports. But she'd agreed. We all had. Because we knew this wasn't over. The coordinates Dr. Thorne had given me led to an abandoned military facility near Rachel. Using equipment borrowed from our government contacts, we opened a controlled portal to the dimensional pocket. Inside, we found them. 23 children, aged between 6 and 17, suspended in temporal stasis. They'd been taken over a period of years, stored like specimens in a collection. We got them all out. Every single one. The reunion with their families was bittersweet. Joy mixed with the horror of what had almost happened. The children had no memory of their captivity. Thought they'd only been gone for hours instead of years in some cases. The youngest, a girl named Lily, pulled me aside before her parents took her home. "I had dreams while I was asleep," she said, her voice smaller than it should have been. "Dreams about truck drivers fighting monsters in the desert. Dreams about you. Was that real?" "What do you think?" I asked. She thought about it, then nodded. "I think heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they drive 18-wheelers. Sometimes they do. Will you keep us safe? From the monsters?" I wanted to lie to her, to tell her there were no monsters. that it had all been a bad dream. But she deserved the truth. Kids always do. "I'll try," I said. "We all will." But even as I said it, I knew the truth. The creatures we'd fought were just the beginning. In those moments when the core shattered, when I'd existed across all dimensions, I'd seen what was coming. The Devourers, Dr. Thorne had called them with her dying breath. Entities that consumed realities like ours consumed food. They were following the trail the creatures had left, drawn by the dimensional disturbances like sharks to blood. And we were not ready.